and welcome to the Junkyard Love Podcast.
At what age do we learn how to have better conversations? At what age do we learn to have better conversations with ourselves?
Ahoy, hello, welcome to the Junkyard Love Podcast. Today's recommendations before we get kicking off is 2 podcasts that you can check out on Spotify or Apple Music or wherever else you find your podcasts. That's going to be the Align podcasts, A-L-I-G-N, Align, and Stuff You Should Know. These are completely different, but they're both wonderful. They both teach you wonderful things about the world around you, your brain, and your body. Today we've got Mika. This episode was recorded somewhere around a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago at the most, premiering now for the first time, but it's quite wonderful. Excited to get into it, so let's get going. Take care of yourself, check on your posture, and breathe from your diaphragm. Let's go. Ooh, we're recording. Hello, Mika.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. We'll just start with how I started with you. You're like, how are you? And I was like, honestly, I'm kind of having a depression day. And I think that, like, I already feel better just like we just talked about it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just being open to where it's like, hey, you probably understand that I can be open about this. Like, I'm not maybe my own 100% today, but I'm still here. You know, it's you can't go into many jobs or like things where you can be like, hey boss, or hey customer, welcome to Starbucks. I'm really fucking depressed today, so if you can just go way easy on me, you know. So
yeah, like if you could just empathize with me really quick and not be like a total dick when you take your order, thanks.
Yeah, if you could just really be nice today of all days. Also, will you scoot in, give me like a fist distance, and you talk to the front of it right here,
like this distance.
Yeah, that's totally good. And you can also, that thing's all you, so you can manhandle it and just move it around if you need to. It is from Amazon, so it's a little on the cheap side, be a little delicate, but it doesn't matter. Mika, cheers, first of all.
Cheers.
You want to talk about a little bit of your background, a little bit of, because I forgot what did we originally, when we were first messaging back and forth, what was our first, like, hey, we should get together and talk about this. I feel like it's branched out to so many, like, we just like talking about emotions in our minds and all these things anyway, but I can't remember exactly what it was at the beginning. Do you?
I can't remember. And I don't really feel like I'm a person who has like ADHD, but when we're talking, I feel like it's kind of just done that, and it's just spiraled out into like so many different topics that I'm like, we can cover so much.
Right. I'm like, here, take my ADHD thoughts, and now you think like me.
Yeah, I can't remember. I know we were originally talking about an interest in exploring more about like my writing or like I guess like the therapeutic practice of it. Mm-hmm. We talked about journaling and gratitude, but then from there we kind of just talked about mental health, which it kind of spurs that direction a lot with me.
Right.
Yeah, I'm open to any content you want to talk about today.
Okay, I want to talk about mental health for sure, but let's talk about writing first. So writing is a thing we talked about, just the act of like journaling, just getting something out. We were talking about like being our own worst critic too. Like sometimes you write something and you're like, okay, that is like, I got it. Like you hit enter, and because at some point it seems like, for one, when you're writing a piece, like it's never really done, but at some point you just gotta be like, okay, I think that's the last sentence, right? So there's that. And then we were talking about how sometimes you can put a piece out, or like write like you do blogs and you're a writer in that way. Put a piece out, and then like a couple months later you're kind of like, I don't know, like what I think of, like, do I think that still? Like, is that still what I like? Do I represent? I don't know. You know, do you ever have like as you're going through, like for me when I'm writing, I'll be discouraged like sometimes halfway through. Like I'll be like, fuck, I don't know if I think this even fully, like as it's coming out. How do you get to where you can like post it? Tell me about your your posting, how you get to where you're like, this is done. I finished this piece. This is good enough to submit.
I actually think the moment of posting is more of an impulse. Maybe it's sometimes just being tired of like looking at it, or I feel really overzealous about it and I'm like, oh, I just feel really confident about this. Like, I don't know why I didn't turn it in sooner. I definitely relate to like getting bored of something some point through writing it. I'm like, I have all these ideas and then just like my mood deflates and I was like, maybe I don't really want to keep writing about that right now. And a lot of things I've returned to months, weeks, years later, and I've revamped it from there. And so there might be like 7 different variations of the same idea throughout the different places I've saved or posted it. But I guess it's like not copywriting if it's yourself. So you always have that. Yeah. Writing down something for me, usually if it's a really good thought or idea, takes like the bulk of it in like one place. And I end up sitting down and writing on that topic anywhere between like 45 minutes to like 3 hours. Sit there writing and editing on it. And it'll only end up being like a page, maybe a page and a half. But I just have, I don't know, it's like some other part of me takes over and helps me write. Some other part of me is working extra hard creatively to come up with like those really niche words for what I'm trying to describe, or those really profound phrases, or it's definitely like the philosophical side of me has to be turned on for a piece of writing to feel valid. I need to have a couple of key phrases or lines in there that I'm like, yes, I've never heard anyone describe it that way. And if this was like a tagline for a movie, that would be it. Like that would be what you pull from it. That's enough of a thought-inducing but specific enough phrasing.
Do you ever impress yourself? Like you write something or some philosophical statement, you're like, Jesus, that's great. Do you ever?
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Yeah, that's a great feeling. It's hard to like, you're like, I don't want to inflate that, I don't want to like lock onto that, but this thing is good because it's, you have those feelings, like, because I have the same thing. Like I'll write something, I'm like, oh man, that's juicy, that's fantastic, you worded it great and everything. And then sometimes the next day you're like, you're a dumb idiot and that word sucks. Like, so sometimes you got to just like, dude, when you have that little like, hey, that's pretty good, you got to really give that to yourself, for me anyway.
Right. And sometimes a thought is really good, but you cannot find the perfect word for it. And those are the times that I wish that like Google was more adaptive and you could explain a sensation and be like, what is the word I'm actually trying to use here that I'm maybe not aware of yet?
I feel like it's probably going to have that soon. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Like Google's algorithms are just so good.
I hope so. Because I have that thought a lot, even in conversation. I'm like, what's the word that I'm thinking of? Because it's kind of uncomfortable how often people come to me and they ask for my opinion on something. And then I want to describe a person or that place or my experience with something in a very specific way that I don't want to mislead them by using like typically functional words like good or fun.
Oh, right.
I'm like, it needs to be much more specific than that, especially if I'm kind of criticizing something, because I don't want to just knock something as that's bad or that's immoral, or I want it to kind of have like a bittersweet understanding of it, because not all things are just black or white. And so I feel like me putting so much pressure on having words to mean something and to be intentional when I write and when I'm talking and when I'm doing counseling with students, it really wears on me mentally, because I just don't want to put the wrong implication out on any person's personality or experience. Or I still want other people who read my stuff or go out and, spend time with the person they were asking about that I've already had experiences with, to build their own opinion of it.
Right. Yeah. I think that, do you ever find that, like, because I get imposter syndrome, I think that like leans into that sometimes. The imposter syndrome of like sometimes you can really know what you're talking about, or like you're talking about this thing very in depth at work, or you're fluently saying the words and you're like, oh, I give this person great advice. And then sometimes and you go to write it, and it's like what you were trying to say and the whole thing that you were trying to express, the whole feeling that you're trying to like tell them, like words just don't get to it. You know, like, do you ever get that? Like, and so it's like, man, like, I know what I'm trying to say, but like this fucking pencil, you know, this paper, like it just doesn't seem to flow what's out of my mind, you know, exactly. It's almost like when I learn about some like stuff in the Eastern traditions, like reading like Buddhism and Hinduism and that sort of stuff, they have words that we don't have. Like we don't have like the Dharma and the Dhamma and like words that mean something so much greater that like in America, we just want to condense it down. Like, no, what's that mean? It's like, well, you can't exactly just put it in one sentence and understand the whole thing. And then also based off of like who you think is reading your blog post or who you think is reading the long message that you send, or who, like, we live in such a diverse world with everybody's like diverse ways of understanding and comprehending things. Like sometimes I feel like you have to like, all right, who do I need to like, what, you know, it's not a mask so much, but like what like wording and what kind of style of phrasing do I need to do or speak of to get to these right people? I don't know if you ever had any of that. Like essentially what I'm saying is like, do you ever have where it's like you go to say something on Facebook or you go to give someone a text, but then it's a completely different kind of like person or style of writing and words that you're using than your blog. Do you ever have that?
Yeah. I try to think about my audience, especially when I'm speaking to someone in person or I'm texting them directly. Because some people can hear my humor because it's really dry, it's really monotone, it's very sarcastic, and it's just so subtle. So I'm very like particular with who I use that with, to make sure that they're not being misled in some way.
Right.
Because I'm also serious, and it's just really hard to tell sometimes unless I give you like a smize or I laugh, but usually I don't indulge in that. I just kind of like, I'm gonna let you work that out on your own.
Right.
But I like,
they're like, are you being mean to me right now? Can you be less mean? You're like, no, I'm laughing.
I like what you said about us not having all of the words. And I've thought a lot about how things get translated between languages, but also how like we play the game like telephone when we were kids, and how quickly just like a couple of words get misunderstood, and how everyone's comprehension isn't the same, or hearing, or level of understanding, or whatever that might look like. I also feel kind of disappointed that we don't have more ways to describe some of the most influential ways of expressing like care for someone, like saying I care for you, or I admire you, or I love you, or I'm in love with you. Like I don't feel like there's enough to really incorporate how you specifically feel about
so much more than that.
Certain people, because you like it's, I don't know, like I think I have guy friends in my life that the cues are misread sometimes, maybe on either side, and I want to tell people a lot how much I care for them or admire them or love them, and I don't think our society really accepts like openly doing that without it coming out very like hippy dippy, like just walking around like peace, love, happiness or whatever. And that it's a bummer that you can't just openly tell people with sincerity, like, oh, I really care for you.
It makes them uncomfortable, right? It's like we don't do that. We don't talk about the real stuff. This is WWE world we're living in. We don't say I love you, you know, like, but it would be nice if there was like, you know, like a new string of words or a new, like, I mean, I think that we should make it okay in our society to say like, I love you. And like, I feel like my friends and I, when it comes to vulnerability, like it just seems like something we improve on all the time. Being able to like sincerely, like I had my friend Nate over yesterday and we had a podcast, and I'm pretty sure that we hugged each other and like made eye contact, looked each other in the eyes and said, I love you, bro. Like it was a sincere, like I felt that, you know, and the amount of men that have probably never felt like that, you know, that like, I mean, I feel pretty lucky, you know, that like I have friends who are willing to be so vulnerable with me and say like, hey man, thanks. You know, I love you. I do appreciate you in my life and stuff. Say that you had a young cat. Here's a situation for you all of a sudden. You had a young cat. He's 17. He's got a manly ass dad. He's like we don't show love in our house. Like we don't do that. How can you like, what would you say to him if he's like, I feel like I have like love for my friends and I want to tell them, but I don't want them to call me gay. I don't want them to like call me a fag, like all these things that all these, you know, shitty words in high school that are apparently so devastating for us to hear, you know. What advice would you give to a 17-year-old who doesn't really know how to communicate love because he's just kind of around a hard ass family?
Oh man.
Just put you on the spot.
I know. I feel like there's a student I currently talk to that's around that age that my perception of his home life growing up is like that. And he's been vulnerable enough to cry in front of me about the things that he's experiencing. And he's one of my favorite students that I connect with, just because he is so mature and he tries to hold so much back, but I can see those guards coming down with me.
Right.
And I know it's not exactly what you asked, but whenever he is like more vulnerable and he's more candid and I see his guards like not being utilized during a session with me, I just really commend him and tell him how much I appreciate his honesty with me and his ability to be vulnerable in here. And I know that we don't grow up in a society that traditionally values men being sensitive, and sharing that with someone else. And I just tell him how much I appreciate it and how validated he should feel for having those feelings. And it goes over pretty well. I mean, you can still see that it's hard for someone to accept compliments when they're not used to having someone be so involved with them emotionally.
Right.
But if he were to try and like take that to his friends, I think he does in subtle ways. I see him becoming more agitated by things that maybe didn't bug him 6 months ago that are now kind of like peeping up on him, and he's not vibing with his friends in the same way. And when they try to like pick little fights with him, or if they've been drinking, and I can see it bugging him now because he's like, he just doesn't see the point of it. He doesn't understand why they can't just act like brothers and have those harder conversations. So I guess I just, if it's really important to that person, I would say just keep continually like leaning in to those desires of wanting to express and be more of a vulnerable person around your friends. And maybe not all of them are going to like adhere to those kind of things, and they might kind of step back or be weird about it, or even be intentionally like rude back at you, or in a joking way even, which is also hurtful. But I think you're going to find that a couple of people in the friend group are going to get on board with that. And maybe at first they'll respond to you in the same way when you're one-on-one.
Right. Yeah.
And then as soon as you get, you know, more people on board with like, no, we're going to show respect here. Like even, what is it? I talk about it all the time with my students and tell them how unhealthy it is. Self-deprecating humor.
That's a huge one in today's world.
Deprecating humor on other people, how unfortunate it is that we utilize that as a coping skill all the time. And I was like, it's so unhealthy. And eventually other people will see how good it feels to be in your presence if you're just constantly respectful. Right.
Yeah, I really like how you said when I was thinking, I was kind of visualizing like the talk with the counselor if I was a 17-year-old. Like I feel like the moment that he wouldn't realize until you pointed it out, or until you gave him this advice, would be the moment where it's like, hey, if you don't realize it right now, you're telling me this right now. That's amazing. Like think about, 3 months ago, man, you wouldn't have even told me, you would have been vulnerable in front of me. I think that like getting to the point where you can talk to someone, or like showing tears in front of someone, like, man, that's actually a huge step right there. And that's a step in the right direction. And I think I definitely want to talk about the self-deprecating humor. I feel like that's something, I love memes. Like memes are fucking hilarious. Like comedy has never been so instantly at our fingertips and so absolutely hilarious. Like the amount of things, pretty much 3 times a day, you can be scrolling through Instagram and be like, oh my God, I didn't realize it, but I have that same exact thought all the time. And that's hilarious. I'm a piece of shit. Like it's like this joking thing. And it's hard because this stuff is genuinely like hilarious. Like even if it's like I care about other people, but there will be ones that are making fun of other people that I'm like, I can't help but laugh, and it's like it's this thing that I noticed when I quit social media for a year, that's like one thing that like, oh, like a lot of my friends, I would stay in contact with them during the week because we'd send, memes back and forth, and we're just like, kind of, we have our own little humor we made a lane for, and we would just send back kind of the same typical whatever, and it's all great. But I think that when it comes to mental health, it's not a really good thing to jokingly make fun of yourself every day, or even try to find things that you can make fun of easily in other people every day. What do you think about, what's your perspective on like memes and the kind of the culture around like the self-deprecating memes, I guess?
I think there's a lot of little fine lines. And I also think it's about getting comfortable with the things that you don't like about yourself and making a choice as to whether or not you actually want to change them. Like I have it on my water bottle, and I don't remember what TED Talk, so I'm not sure who to give credit to. It was about career choices, actually, but it ended up being really mental health directed. And it's, you can either choose unconditional love and acceptance or change at any time in your life. That's like your only two options, only two good options, unconditionally love yourself and accept yourself, or decide to make a change for something that you can unconditionally love and accept, because the other alternative is just being miserable.
Yeah, I like that a lot. That's like sticking to it.
The amount of work is kind of the same, because you're going to keep thinking and ruminating on it. But you can either be ruminating on the fact that you're like, well, I am trying to work on that, and sometimes I lapse in judgment, or sometimes I do. Like driving here, I went out of turn for like a 3-way stop, and I was like, oh, I'm so stupid. And I'm like out loud, like verbally, I still do that. And I have to really think, and I have to add like a sometimes, or, I don't get it yet. Like I preach that to kids too, adding yet on the end of something, just because you can kind of save the thought and be like, yeah, well, I said the thing, but I'm not saying it's definite.
Right.
I'm not always on my guard like I'd like to be. I'm not always making positive growth choices, but I can be like, I'm working on it though. Like It's not.
Yeah. I noticed that. I mean, just the noticing of like, you didn't just let yourself feel that like, oh, you're an idiot for going out of your turn on that 3-way stop. You noticed that you were trying to like feel bad to yourself. Like you're trying to say like, hey, you suck or whatever in this way. I think that moment of noticing, I always like just like putting a pin in that, like that's all you need to do. Is that moment of noticing, and then what? You don't have to like hold on to it. You can be like, oh, okay, I was a little mad at myself for that, but that's okay. I'm changing. Like I'm working on it. Like maybe I'm not the best driver. That's okay. Whatever.
Yeah. Let yourself off the hook as much as you can morally do so. I feel like that's kind of the line that I like to, don't let yourself off the hook for bad things that you need to fix or correct or apologize for to feel better. But little things like that. There's so much that's not illegal. Like I know we have all these new laws and stuff, but in a very real way, like Washington state laws or federal laws, there's so much that's not illegal that I don't know why we incorporate so much guilt and shame into our life if there's not like a philosophical law or a federal law that's telling you like that's a no. Like you're not supposed to do that. Yeah. You don't need police officers constantly like in your face for like, why didn't I just do the dishes last night? Right. I really wasn't that tired. Or why didn't I just let that person go instead of being, maybe feeling like selfish about going first. I just think about that a lot, how much we feel guilty for or shame ourselves for or make fun of ourselves and use self-deprecating humor. And it's like, for what? Is anybody really listening? Like most of the time we're by ourselves.
Yeah,
and
who we trying to make laugh here?
It's unimportant. If things still get done, or you feel like you still have the opportunity to make an amend, or you really do agree with what you said, even if it didn't come out the nicest, you don't have to completely backstep and be like, oh, well, I shouldn't have said that. You can just be like, my heart was in the right place and I should have phrased it differently. I talk to kids a lot about not apologizing for things that you're not sorry for. Like it's not transparent. Yeah. And you shouldn't do it.
Rachel Hollis talks about that too.
Yeah. It sounds kind of bitchy, but like sorry, not sorry. It's just a shorter way of saying I'm not really apologetic for what I said because it's how I feel. But either I could have said it more respectfully, or I could have asked if you wanted my opinion first. But if you did ask for my opinion and you weren't happy about it, you know, I'm not going to adjust the way I feel.
You open that door. I can't like you said it, I got to spike it, you know, like it's, if someone's saying like, help me, that you don't get to choose the way that it's helped sometimes, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I think that we do get to the sorry, not sorry thing. I think I see that too much in like the mean girl world, like where they just love that saying.
Right.
And I guess I'm saying they as if I like know an entire group or something, but just like it's not about being rude, and it's not about like just plowing over people and like being like, well, I'm focusing on myself and I'm being the best version of myself and all that, like just fucking stepping on people. That's not how it works. But I think like, yeah, not always apologizing, not always, even the little apologies. I mentioned Rachel Hollis. She like if you're late, apologizing, or if you bump into someone saying sorry, or if like you realize the word sorry. I mean, that's a word that a lot of us get into saying more than we say any other word. Like as soon as you're in the presence of another one, I probably, you know what? I'll ask you about this. This could be just something that I just watched Birds of Prey, and I've been talking a lot about like the masculine, feminine energy that's going on in society. Do you feel as a woman, that you like, not knowingly, but like, do you feel like you like apologize to men more? Like if you like bump into them or something, like, do you feel that?
Very much so.
Oh, you want to talk about that?
I've gone through phases, especially working in serving industry when I was working at Silver Star, where I felt like I always take a backseat when I'm walking in public places to me adjusting where I'm at if someone is like possibly going to run into me, whether it's they're not paying attention because they're on their phone, or they're simply just not acknowledging like how close their body is about to be to my body, that I will move to the right or to the left or stop or, you know, reposition myself. And for a while I was like, that's really great because I'm so aware of where my body is and I'm just being respectful of other people. But then I kind of got to a point, especially working in a bar, that I was like, screw that. Why do I have to keep moving? Like I have a tray full of cups or drinks, or like I'm the only person that really needs to get from point A to point B right now to provide service. And people are standing and like circling in pathways and walkways. And so I stopped moving out of the way, and I actually had people spill their drinks on me. I had drinks that I had on trays spill, and I let other people be sorry for a change. I'm like, well, maybe you should pay attention to where you're going. It shouldn't have to be on me, you know, and I struggle with road rage a little bit. And so occasionally I think the same thing in cars, and I was like, but I don't really want to have to deal with like damages if I decide to like be like. So
you don't just ram into people.
But, you know, there might come a day.
Just watch out. If we see you on the road, you're just going to ramp. Like, my blinker was on first. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. But I feel like it's a choice now that I'm aware of that. Especially when it comes to like moving where I'm at when I'm around people or and I'm in a crowd. If I'm taking the back seat and I'm being more submissive and I'm just choosing to be respectful and be like, all right, I'm just going to make sure that I don't, you know, have anything spill on me today, or I'm not going to bump into anyone. And then there are other days that I'm like, you know, I don't understand why more people aren't making that conscientious choice. It's crazy. And I don't like using gender stereotypes at all, but I do feel like it's usually, whether it's like a height thing, it seems to be more men than women. It seems like women will be distracted on their phones, but they will happen to like look up just in the nick of time, and they'll like move, and then they'll do that to me and they'll go, oh, sorry, like for almost touching me.
Right.
So it's just, I don't know. It's just one of those little things that now that I've noticed it, and it sounds like you kind of think about it, and I know there are other people I've talked to about it. It's silly, but it still feels important, or like it's the principle sometimes.
Yeah. It's not so much about like getting up in arms and like, hey, like, you know what, you should be the one to say sorry. It's not so much that. It's kind of like you notice that it's like, hey, like I assumed that everybody who wasn't a jerk kind of just kept aware of the people around them and like didn't want to bump into like, oh, and if I'm the one in this chicken, we're walking towards each other's situation and it's more logical for me to move, I'll step out of the way. You'd think that like everybody thinks like that.
Right.
But I think, working in a bar, you probably definitely experience like, oh no, these people are just so drunk, of course, but just so focused on themselves. I think that I don't know. I think that I've always kind of been the, like I'll step out of your way as well. But I think that it's probably like my upbringing, I did a lot of walking, like walk to school in the morning, walk home from school, walk to work, walk home from work, all these things. So it's pretty much like I'm very aware of like where I'm at when someone's coming up on the sidewalk. And I'm like, it's just something that I've always been crazy aware of, like where I'm walking and not being in other people's way and these things. But you realize that not everybody thinks like that. And there's people who are just walking, completely thinking about themselves the entire time. It's not supposed to be maybe a selfish thing, but they're blowing past other people. Some guys are living their life as if they're the monster truck, and women and small people are just kind of like the fucking little cars in the field, Yeah, that's interesting. I think noticing it though, I think like just not, a lot of us can take down our importance, our sense of importance in public situations, like when our chest is so out and our tough guy is so on that it's like if you bump into me, I'm going to give you a look to make sure you're not a guy trying to bump up against me in that way, because I'll fuck you up, It's
right.
like you're being so tough, but you're ended up like you're taking out people who are not trying to intimidate you. People are just trying to live their life. I think it's huge to be watching out for where you're going, like don't over obsess about it. Think about yourself, but like watch out for people,
Yeah. And I think some of it is made worse by cell phones. I feel like it probably wasn't that way 25 years ago. Manners have changed around what's decent to do around other people, and how much your attention should be focused on them or looking up, or where you should be walking.
Right.
As a female, I pay attention when I'm on dates. If you have the opportunity to walk on a sidewalk next to your date, if the guy is on the outside, and right. I really don't care so much, because I feel like I'm perfectly capable and I'm pretty aware, when you walk by yourself, you can walk on whichever side you want.
Right.
But I do think it's a nice thing to see men that are aware of that.
Yeah.
And I would never complain about it or be like, oh, switch me sides, like be a gentleman. But I do take notice.
Yeah. It's nice to know that they thought about that.
Right. Yeah. And, for the ones that don't do that, maybe their family didn't teach them that way. And so it's not like they're not a gentleman. They're just maybe not a gentleman in that way, right, because it wasn't taught. But there has been like some that are on the other side of it and they were taught and they just don't do it. And I'm like, ugh, you guys.
I think it's a huge thing in my head. I wonder if I was taught, I must have been taught at a young age that, because that's definitely something that's been huge in my mind. Like Shaylee and I will walk to the store and I'll be switching sides of her. Like it's a short walk, but I'll be like switching sides to make sure it's like this automatic thing where I'm on the outside. But it's kind of it's a silly thing, but I think it is more of a gesture. It's like it's almost one of those things we were talking about, like there's not words for, but what I'm doing is I'm not trying to like assert any dominance or anything. It's kind of like just a gesture towards the woman, towards the person you're walking with, of like, hey, I'm thinking about you right now.
Yeah,
like,
I care for you.
Yeah, I'm looking out for you, just so you know. Like if a car comes out, I'll fuck that car up, like, or it'll kill me first, This thing, you could stop a car with your hand or something.
Yeah, and anyone who is older than the person next to them, or like if it's a child specifically, anyone should take that role and be on the outside with a child, mm-hmm, or a pet. It just makes sense. For people who this does not click in their brain, we should explain what this is. Actually, we should, like, for the people who are like, what are you talking about? So as a man, there's like a thing where it's a safety thing. I think, you walk the side nearest the car. So if you're on a sidewalk, the woman would walk on the inside, and it's a gesture of like, I don't know, like, do we really think a car's going to skip the curb, or what do you think on this? I've seen some crazy wrecks, and there have been some like vehicle malfunctions lately with them crashing into buildings.
Oh yeah.
So anything is possible. I simply think just talking about bad driving, but for like the bad drivers out there that miscalculate if they're going to hit a curb or not, or if they took a corner too closely, putting, the masculine person, the male in the relationship on the curb has just been an act of safety for like women. Right. Or like, I don't know, maybe it came from like a like a misogynist place, like let the women window shop while we walk.
Oh, shit,
put her on the inside, but they kind of like changed the script on it. They're like, hey, maybe this sounds better if we're being men. But yeah, I don't know. I wonder where that got established, or I mean, as soon as we had streets and roads, or like was there like a kind of gentleman courtesy back in like the olden days too?
I'm thinking of like what would a lion do? Like if there's like, because I feel like, a female lion is just as badass as a male lion in so many ways, right? Like, I'm just trying to think of like, there's like, okay, there's a predator over there. Like, is the male going to just out of instinctual, like if this other lion tries to attack our family sort of, I don't know how the fuck lion works really.
Positioning.
Yeah. Positioning yourself. Maybe it is like an intuitive like evolution thing even.
I do think it is. And there's a lot of psychology behind positioning. And I learned about this when I was getting my bachelor's. And I found it really interesting. We talked about proximity and positioning based on what you want to get out of something in a classroom. So people who sit in the back are trying to look more laid back. Like it's an impression that you're wanting to give. Or people who sit closest to the door maybe have anxiety or PTSD and they need that escape. Like you position yourself, where you feel most comfortable in a classroom or when you're at a bar or a restaurant. Like I think a lot of people instinctually do that. And then when you're with a person, I think you're always making choices. And I feel like I'm kind of like, I get anxious. So I think about weird outcomes of things and I like to know where the exits are. And that doesn't have any attachment to like PTSD or anything like that. Just trying to have a game plan in case chaos kind of broke loose for some reason.
Yeah.
When you're with someone else, you take into account like, am I putting myself first? Am I putting them first? And so when you're walking with someone, taking the outside towards the road, no matter who you are, you're kind of choosing them over you in a way. You're thinking that's the safest place for a person to be is on the inside. Yeah,
it does actually communicate quite a bit, if you're paying attention. I like that. It's interesting to point out. And it's also the thing about where you choose in the classroom, like, because I was definitely like in the back, but my thing has always been I have to be able to see the door. I have to be able to be facing the door. Like my back can't be to the door because I don't like being snuck up on. But like, it's interesting. I've actually, in my healing process and in my like, okay, that's how I am. But I noticed that it would start to distract me. Like, oh, we went to the Dermot Kennedy down at the Moda Center. We went to that concert and where I was, we're on the side and we're just right in the front of the stands there. So I can see everybody in general admission. And everybody who's like walking who doesn't have a chair, they're standing in front. So I can see them and that's not too bad. But the corner of my eye right here on the right side was the entrance for all of them. And there's a bar in there, so people going in and out, in and out. And I literally couldn't focus on the fucking stage because I couldn't let myself get rid of like these people at the corner of my eye. Like I always had to make sure it's like wait, like you don't have a gun, do you? Like, it's not like I didn't actually think I was in danger. It was just an intuitive thing that's always turned on for me of I can't really, if there's a distraction on the corner of my eye of like people or like things that like, I don't really know who you are, what you're doing or movement. It's interesting, but I think that, over time that was more recent and I noticed it, but over time, when we go to restaurants and we go to eat somewhere or when Shay and I sit down, she knows that I'm like that, and she'll usually pick the one where my back's not to the door. But actually, I have, because I'm sick of being in a fight or flight when I'm just trying to be really experience this moment with the person I'm with. So I've actually been making the choice to have my back to the door, and I could feel it's nervous. I don't like it at first, but then before I know it, I forget. I forget, and I'm having a conversation. And because a lot of times when you kind of do things based off of fear, like you get to the back of the classroom or you do choose that seat nearest the door, you are deciding like be ready for this thing, sort of, right? And it's almost this like you're looking for something you're not fully present with that moment, right? It's a we're protecting ourselves, but it can be non-beneficial.
It's very accurate. Your body is always trying to keep itself safe. Your body wants to preserve itself. Your body wants to stay alive. Your body is always acting on instinct. And if things raise little red flags or make you nervous, your body is always encouraging you to sink back into your comfort zone. Do what it means to protect yourself. And so when you step outside that bubble, it's very intentional. You're choosing to do something that makes you a little bit nervous. You're choosing to go outside your comfort zone. It's a choice. And sometimes that choice is for other people, you know? And so I just think that's something that people don't think about, that comfort is what comes naturally. Comfort is so hard to fight with and challenge back and forth and be like, I'm going to take time away from you, because it's everything in your body says, no, don't do that thing. Yeah. I want to remain safe. And so it's hard. You have to train yourself to try to challenge yourself to step outside of that and tell yourself, you know, when you get those nervous, anxious feelings, like, there's a good percentage I'm okay. Like, there's going to be like a 98% chance that I'm going to be okay doing this, you know, unless it's not some like crazy extreme sport that has like no boundaries, but having
your back's against a rugby field.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I used to watch when I was younger, 1,000 Ways to Die, and there were some weird things on there, just like off the wall, like, oh, I never thought about that being a possibility.
Now I do.
But if we think about how much chaos and destruction and opportunities there really are to like injure ourselves in a day, if we're not careful, if we're totally clumsy, you know, if we woke up every day drunk and we had no other choice, or on psychedelics and tried to like configure our way around, you know, a moving platform, even like,
Jesus.
We really do okay. Most people day to day, like the fact that we don't constantly get paper cuts or we don't break fingers and toes every month. Like, it's kind of crazy how strong and invincible our bodies are most of the time.
Yeah, we're pretty soft and fragile, man. Like, have you ever worked at like a machinery, like a mill somewhere where it's like at all times, it's like I worked at Weyerhaeuser. I'm like, dude, at any point I can reach my arm into this thing and it will not even skip a beat. It will rip my arm off with all the skin and it will not miss a beat. Like, we have so many little things that we have done to protect ourselves and like learn about, like, and they're natural things now, like the paper cut thing. Like, we come across a lot of paper. We never get paper cuts. Mm-hmm. We've gotten this down pretty well, but I think we need to. There is a lot of places, for me anyway. There was places where I'm like, man, my guard's up too much. My guard is up too much. My armor has been on too long. I am in a safe environment, and my partner's safe, and I don't need to be watching the door the whole time. I could think about Olive Garden. I can think about these breadsticks. You know, like, you don't have to be or in fear. What do you remember what got you into like psychology and studying the mind and emotions and stuff? Like, what first sparked that? Do you remember?
A lot of little things. Probably the biggest thing was a suggestion from my grandma. She and I are super close. I know we talked about that the first time we met up. She was the one who raised me for my kindergarten school year. So like my first big year at school. And she had all this extra time. I think they were retired already, both my grandparents. And so they were just always around teaching me like school on top of school, but not in like an annoying way. And I think my grandma really helped me build my like social emotional piece of myself, and always allowed that patience for me to learn and make errors. And you know, when I made mistakes at grandma's house, like, I didn't flinch or worried that I was going to get yelled at. She'd be like, oh, well, what happened here? And so I really learned and developed that from her. And so I would go to school because she would make me second guess like why bad things happen and try to come up with like a silver lining as to like, you know, there's some good that comes out of bad too. There's lessons. And so I would come home from school and I would tell her about the children that were like particularly like naughty, just like bad behavior, screamers, hitting friends, you know, using foul language, whatever it might be. And I'd come home, and I got to the point with her that I would start coming home, and instead of just complaining and being like, well, this kid is just nuts, like, I don't want to be their friend, they scare me. I'd come home and be like, well, I wonder if their parents yelled at them yesterday. or I wonder if they didn't have breakfast. And so she really helped me change the script on like, I can't begin to understand why a person is acting shitty today. I don't know. Maybe if I asked them, they still wouldn't tell me the truth. Maybe they don't even know. Right. So just assuming that people are inherently good and they just make mistakes, and maybe something happened and it was an off day, because you're still getting to know these kids and we're young. And so
it's powerful at a young age.
I took that with me. I did well enough in school. I got honors, or like at least like above a 3.0, but nothing really particularly hit. Like I liked writing and I liked literature and I liked reading, but it wasn't what I wanted to focus on. And I didn't like being told what to do with my writing. Very like respectfully defiant. But when it came time to do Running Start, I took a lot of psychology courses because she said, well, if you don't want to be a nurse, because that was what she wanted for me, she's like, maybe you should go into psychology, because you've always tried to understand why people do the things they do and why you do the things you do and how you can understand both them and yourself better. And so I just kind of took it and ran with it. And classes were hard, classes were intense, but they were usually interesting. And I would be able to apply everything I learned in my classes and my waking life, my normal life. And I just, even if I don't end up continuing to pursue careers in psychology fields, I can use it in any career field, and I still hold on to that. Like I don't know. It's such an interest of mine that I never stop researching or growing out of just pure intrinsic motivation to do so in that realm.
Yeah.
So I feel like I would have been doing myself a disservice to go to college for business or medicine, unless I double majored, because it's just, that's where my heart was at the time. And sometimes I knock myself because the pay is not good for this career choice. But I really like it and I get a lot out of it. And I feel like I've matured a lot faster just because of a fascination in it.
Right.
And it's actually coming like full circle. You said something or posted something about like 4 months ago that you weren't meaning to like come off bold, I don't think, but I got really defensive about it. And whenever I get defensive, I like to think about like, why am I defensive? Like, is it actually encroaching on my morals, my ethics, my beliefs? Or is it because it's something I need to work on and do better? And the thing that you said, I can't remember the exact words verbatim, but you were talking about like why, if someone has studied psychology and mental health, still suffer with it. Like was kind of like the thought you were having. And I'm like, and I got frustrated by that because I do struggle with it still. And I'm like, well, I studied it and like I should, but I just really sat with it. And I'm like, that's kind of the point, is like, you never really get to like understand mental health. Like you can have answers, you can have tools or solutions or understanding and awareness, but you never really get to like know it. It's not like solving a math problem where you're like, oh, there's one answer to this math problem.
Yeah. All of a sudden you feel better. Oh, that's the answer. Cool. Blue skies.
Right. And I think some people really strive for that, and they need that consistency of like, there is a problem and there is a solution, and mental health is like, there's both, sometimes not both. Right. Like it's kind of just this like shoulder shrug, like, I don't know.
Right. Okay. I want to unpack my arrogance there. I'm trying to think, because I mean, we were kind of talking about that this morning. Like I was saying, like, well, this is something I tell Shaylee, like today, for example, as I woke, I was just not a great day for me in my head. But what I get so frustrated about is I'm such like I can handle it. I can do this. I can fucking find the answer. Like I will do it. Give me 10 hours, close that door. You come in 10 hours, I'm going to have this solved. Like that's who I am. And like when it comes to mental health, it's like, it doesn't work like that. And it's so frustrating. Like for me, like I can be talking to Shaylee this morning, for example, I was talking to Shaylee about it. And I'm like, I know the answers. I know, like, it's not logical for me to be thinking these things. And to feel better, I know that I'm going to go outside and I'm going to do physical activity. And it'll kind of pull me out of that state. And then I'll be able to, like, I know, like, what I can do, but you can't just cure these things. You can't just all of a sudden, like, it's like you don't become God just by reading some shit in the Bible, you know, like you don't,
Yep.
you know, the difference between the words and the conceptualization of like, okay, I think I understand that. And then like the actual understanding and knowing, there's like a huge gap there. Yeah, that's crazy. I wonder what, I'm trying to think of like what more I was saying in that situation. Cause I feel like a lot of times it's a lot of stuff that I'm like aggressively sprouting on Facebook or like on my pedestal about is like, I'm 10 hours deep into the content of what I think other people are like it's almost like my social media sometimes with what I'm saying is aggressive, and I understand it because I'm like I'm starting the conversation halfway through. Like they don't know what I was just reading, what I'm talking about exactly. So they just get like that part. I'm getting better at clarifying that, I guess, but
I think it was just a really good thought. And I've grown to like the things that make me defensive because it doesn't sit and like eat at me anymore for most things. I'm still growing. I'm human. But it really draws my attention to like the Robin Williams quote, like when the bad things happen, it draws your attention to the good things you weren't paying attention to. So like when I get defensive about something, it draws my attention to something that has bugged me, but maybe that has been lessened over time. Like maybe it doesn't sit with me as long, or I'm like, well, I have really made strides in this area. It's just kind of a thought that I can allow to pass. Right. And now we're working on just getting rid of that thought. I was kind of thinking of a metaphor for like, I don't know, like positive feelings of self-worth and your value and like good solid wellness and mental health is kind of like trying to like hold sand. Like you don't get to keep it the whole time. It's going to fall through the cracks. And if someone comes over and like smacks your hand from underneath and all the sand falls off of it, you know, you're going to be angry. Like you can be rattled, you can be shaken, right. You can be tested. You can't just hold things for yours to keep and expect nothing to fall out or to lessen. And so, you know, they preach in elementary schools like to be bucket fillers for yourself and for others. And I think that's why self-care is so important, because like if it is like sand and it just falls through your fingers and you don't get to control it, you just have to keep filling it. Like if a bucket had a hole in it, just keep filling the bucket so that it's never totally empty, instead of being like, oh, well, things just aren't going my way. There's a hole in my bucket, so I'm just going to eventually not have sand, and that's fine. Like it's such... I feel like when you put it that way, it's like so obvious. And they're like, just keep, I don't know. I mean, maybe someday you'll figure out a way to like stop that so it doesn't happen. But if it doesn't, do you really just like lay down and give it up and say, oh, that's just, I'm going to let today be a shitty day? Like, no, just decide to laugh. Decide to make it easier on yourself, because we don't get to move time faster or slower. I mean, you still have to experience what you're going
still
through.
Going on. That's, you know, that resonates with me because I had a conversation with my mom yesterday about like my family just has like a history of like mental breakdowns and like really bad depression and all this stuff. And I was talking to my mom yesterday. She said like her mom did it, and my mom my mom, like, you know, we dealt with like a lot of stuff when I was younger, and that was her. She just kind of checked out. She just kind of broke down. And it was like, I'm done being a mom, sort of thing. And it was essentially, I was kind of like talking to her about like what, like that feeling of like, if all else fails, I can just give up. I can let my bucket empty, right? And I was like, do you notice that that's like a feeling? Like you can take a look at that. Like why do I think that it's okay to just let my hands go and say, you know what, fuck it all. I'm gonna let my bucket be empty, and I'm gonna lay on the ground, and I'm not gonna pick myself up and these things. And you know, it sparked some interesting thoughts between her and I. But I think that you know, I've had to tell myself, it's something that I've had now that I have, you know, I have like a huge will to live now, you know, like my depression isn't, sometimes it really fucking kicks my ass, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be, to where it was just very debilitating. I dreamt of that empty bucket, you know, like I was just like, that's what I'm saying is I think that like removing that as an option, like looking at that, like, hey, that's a thought that like I could just give up. like that is a thought itself. Like that's not like a viable option. And I think what life is a lot of the times is filling your bucket, even having the faith that you don't know how to repair that hole in that bucket right now, but if you just keep filling that bucket and keep going, and you're going to learn how to block that hole. You're going to learn like, okay, there is a hole here in this bucket, something's coming out, like I don't have the right tools, the right emotional tactics to handle these things. But I think having the faith that,
right, yeah, I don't have it yet.
Yeah.
But you can't just like give up on it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, realistically, I feel like it is such a morbid thought, and like suicide rates are high, I guess. Just the mentality that, I mean, that really is honestly always a choice if people really want to choose it. But again, like I said, it's a choice. Like, are you really, I don't know, I get so stuck on like, don't be a victim to circumstance. Like, don't be a victim to what other people say about you. You can, you can experience it. Don't fall victim to it. Don't let it become you. Don't just give up and throw in the towel and act like, it's all everyone else's fault that you are the way you are. That's not true. It's a choice. You gave up. You chose to be miserable. Like, I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. You always have the choice to try, to try and save yourself, to try and be better, to work through it. And I think the middle ground to that is just taking days to be in your own space with yourself if you need it. Like, if you feel like you can't handle what the world's throwing at you, maybe that is a day that you lay in bed all day and you listen to music. And it's kind of like the middle ground. Like, you don't always have to be out there like fighting the good fight if you feel like you're just exhausted, but you also don't have to like sit there ruminating on the bad circumstances that are around you and continuing like to perpetuate them and doing nothing about it.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like the biggest stride that, I mean, maybe other people, the only reason I want to say this is because I think it might make other people feel better, is that when it comes to mental health, I think the biggest stride of all is going from thinking that suicide or just like total decline, thinking of it as like a plan B or a plan Z or whatever, and just deciding that it's not an option.
It's not an option.
You want things to happen as they occur naturally. So yeah, at some point, if you're really sad, like your natural time will come to pass, but choosing that is the way, letting it happen naturally. So everything between then and now, that unknown date, is you making the best out of what you think you can work with.
Right. Yeah. I really like that you said it about it not being an option, like removing that option from the table. I think that's kind of what I did at some point. I was like, it's not like, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to bring that pain to the people in my life. I'm not going to, and you want to do it for yourself, but at that moment that was like,
it's
all
for
I had.
other people first.
Yeah. That's, I think I said this, I had this long Facebook post. This was years ago, but, and it got misconstrued because, it's typing and I come out aggressive sometimes. And, but it was essentially like this long thing about like, listen, like if you don't love yourself, if you don't care about yourself, if you hate yourself, if you're like, why would I do better? I don't deserve to be better. Like these things, like, cause sometimes you can, and I know very well, you can get so far down that it's like any sort of like positive influence towards yourself is just fucking ridiculous. You want to laugh at it. You're just like, yeah, that guy doesn't deserve that. Like, because people's brains can get like this. But the post was essentially like, well, if you don't have it for yourself, like think about your friends. And it's not about thinking about their pain so much as like do it for your friends. Like you do bring value to their life. Like, how do you bring value to their life? You could, if you died, if you end your life, you bring sorrow and pain to your friends. And this is a hard thing because it gets messy there. You don't want to put that more on self-hurt, self-worth, but I think that in moments where you admit you just can't give any love to yourself, if you just let yourself think about a couple of your good friends and you think about, their mom and their dad, and you think about your friend and you think about how 10 years ago, he was just kind of a young turd. And you think about 5 years before that, he was a young kid, and you think about their whole life. And I think that you can start to find value. And this is worst case scenario. If you have no self-worth for yourself, I think that you can find value in just the life of the people around you and be like, okay, I don't have really any self-worth here. I don't really have any like will, like, I don't think that I'm super cool, but I do have people in my life that their life, you know, I could be a good person for them. I could improve myself. I can get up off the ground because like my friend Jimmy is probably one of the coolest people I know. And like, it would make me feel really good to buy him a beer tomorrow. Or it would make me, if I could, if I'm available to watch my friend Cindy's kid when she's on a work trip like that, I bring value to Cindy's life and her kid's life, you know. These are stretched, but essentially my Facebook post was it's hard to understand, but I think some people it might have resonated. Like, if you don't have it for you, you just think about other people, like serve your friends, like get better for other people. And that's not something that you really want to hear, like first, like, because you want to get better for yourself first and foremost. But I think that some people get so dark, and I know for a fact, because I did, you get so deep that you're like, why the fuck would I do anything for myself? I'm the one who screwed all this up. You know, I'm the one who, whatever, like these foolish thoughts that were stuck in the groove, you know? Yeah, that was a post that I had a while back ago about like doing it for other people.
It brings up some really good points though. People who are depressed or struggle with anxiety and like bipolar disorder and all sorts of things, they really get pegged as narcissistic or only thinking of themselves or them as the center of their universes. But really, there's so much guilt tied in with not wanting to burden other people with their condition. Mm-hmm. And so when they're ditching plans and being flaky and people are having to make special adjustments for them, you know, it makes you want to refrain from it, like experiencing things with other people, because you don't want to take away or, you know, make you have special treatment because you don't feel like you deserve it at that time. But I've seen a lot of people have mental health stuff going on, particularly women, just because that's my experience with it, but come out of it. Like women who go into a pregnancy depressed come out and they don't have postpartum. And I just think that's kind of like a crazy thing, like having something else to care about, having someone else to care about, and it happens so instinctually.
Oh yeah. It
like removes it and it alleviates it from them. And so if you don't have a child in your life and a reason to do that, maybe it's a grandparent, maybe it's a younger sibling, maybe it's a friend. And I think that's where you're kind of going with that. It has to become about other people for a while because you don't have that self-worth and you don't have that self-love. And so you can't motivate yourself to do things for yourself and then validate that practice yet. But you can validate it for being available to other people. And when someone who struggles with mental health is strong enough and gets really good at empathizing because they've been there or they still are there, you really begin to realize that someone who's depressed or has anxiety or bipolar disorder isn't narcissistic at all. They can really meet other people where they're at when they're low, and maybe they can't, you know, be at a higher vibration with people sometimes because they have that mental health piece going on that's not always up to par. But they can certainly always meet someone where they're at because they understand it. Yeah. And what I just think sometimes, like, what would the world we be in now if we went back in time where there was no understanding of mental health and everyone was just either like the coolest thing ever, like that overconfidence that people just had to have because it was like there was no other option.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that society now is kind of reaching a point where we're really validating, like, meeting people where they're at, and we're trying to find the humility in things again and preaching like empathy. It's so important to have empathy for others.
That word has come up so much on my podcast. I love it.
Just not, I don't know, just thinking for a second outside of yourself. Maybe this person is experiencing something that I'm never going to get to understand or I'm never going to know the answer to, but choosing to believe that they're not intentionally being in an unsavory way.
Yeah, I think, yeah, right. I think that it's hard for our brain to fully comprehend, but I think like a lot of like the Buddhism stuff that I read has made me like, it's a fact, and like you could say the sentence, but there does start to become this understanding, this comprehending, and I begin to see it in like total strangers. Like I see that I see this light in myself when I see it, when I see strangers, but just this fact of like, nobody wants to suffer. There's nobody. Do you know anybody who's like, I fucking love suffering. I love not having a bed to go home at night. Like, it's so great to sleep outside and be cold. Like, no, man. They're like, when you talk to them, they're, even a lot of times their ego is defending their body. They're like, their ego is defending their actions. They don't want to be embarrassed. It's already an embarrassing situation. Like, just think about a homeless person. Like, they don't want to be homeless. They want love. A human wants love. A human wants to love themselves more than anything. And there's clearly some things that have caused that person in their life to like not be able to feel that love for themselves. And I don't know, I feel like as I progress and as I keep like reading all these things, it's like a genuine, like, I get, virtue signaling, like I'm so much more compassionate than everybody, but it really is profoundly like you start to see the world in a different way when you could really just look at everybody who's suffering and just be like they just want love. Like they truly want love at the core of their being. It's kind of hard when we get so far-fetched. We have like, politicians and like all these things that we see in the news, right, of like, that motherfucker's just mean, whatever, but at the core of their being, they want love. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's super interesting. Let's I want to back up to your writing a little bit more. We were talking about you were like down on yourself because you like submitted something and it didn't get accepted, but I was like,
yeah, hey,
do you realize that I think about submitting stuff all the time, and like I don't even get shit done to where it's submittable. Like you're like you were discouraging to yourself, but like you're doing just fine. Like you're like getting to the point of actually submitting, like, okay, well, I'm gonna put this to where people can read it online. Like this is now available. This is my words from my head, and now people can like have it and use it. Like that's a huge step. That's like that's a huge thing. And when was do you remember the first time, like how long ago it was since you first like posted or like finished something to where you're like, I'm gonna put that to where the world can read it? Do you remember that?
I think the first time I posted something online or like on my personal blog probably would have been within like 5 to like 7 years ago, sometime towards the end of high school.
Oh, that's longer than I thought.
But the first time that I actually submitted it to like another website to be represented by, an actual business was November of last year. So that's been like really short term.
Yeah. Was it a freeing feeling when you hit submit, or like what was it like?
I don't know. It was kind of like hitting submit was like not a big feeling when I hit submit. It felt very like lackadaisical or something. I was just like, okay, well, I do think this is good. And I finally figured out how to do it, and I just hit submit, and then I went about my day and I did other things. It was like a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon. But when I didn't know how long it would take to get rejected or accepted or to get the email from them that says it's on the site, I didn't even know what the process really looked like. So when I got the email, gosh, it was the week of my birthday, actually. It was a Tuesday. And I had just gotten off work, and I was going to my friend Kelsey's house, and I got my emails and I was deleting them before I went into her house, just sitting in my car. And when I saw the little, what emoji is it? I think it's like a fire emoji that says like your article has been submitted to
Nice.
Thought Catalog. And I saw that, and I literally like started like screaming, and like,
Oh yeah.
like I haven't been that excited about something in maybe like a decade. Honestly, just, I don't think I've ever experienced that I can remember like now, that feeling of just like utter happiness that something of mine got published in some way. And that's what I realized, like, it lasted for about an hour. I was very excited, very happy, and I wanted everyone else to match my emotions. So I told Kelsey and I told a few people in that hour. I called my parents and sent them the link. And, about an hour and a half later, I was sitting there with myself and I'm like, oh, fuck. Now that means we feel like we're going to be really let down if the next one doesn't get accepted. And like, and I started to realize how important it was to me to get my writing out there. And I get really stuck sometimes on thinking like I'm only making baby steps, or like there are lots of days where I don't write in a row anything. And I watch Gary Vee and I'm like, oh, I should be pushing myself harder. Like I should be a real go-getter about this. And maybe I'm just like not there yet. Yeah. I like the relaxed benefit of just being able to write on my own accord when I feel passionately, when I feel like I have the words, when I feel like that philosophical creative side of me is like really activated, and submitting at my leisure because I don't have any writing deadlines. And, in the back of my head, I kind of hold hope that someday I will, because that's where the big deals are. I think you will. But right now, I like that I don't. I feel like I have so much else in my life, so much personal work that I'm just trying to like shovel through. That's just like leaves constantly falling, and I keep breaking. And I'm like, oh my goodness, when does this personal growth thing get like just a tad easier to where I'm not constantly being challenged every day, with old concepts and ideals. So I think maybe when my life slows down and I get more established in my like material world, when I have nothing else to really think about, that's when I'm going to get so restless that I'm just going to sit and write in my free time and start really cranking out, when I get to the end of like my emotional journey that kind of started about a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago, with the end of like my most recent relationship. When I feel like I've kind of reached a pause in it, or like the finality of some of those things that I've been struggling with, I can be like, okay, now that I've seen the whole thing through, I can actually piece it together and write about it, and then write about it in a way that is current tense.
Right.
And silver lining string through all of it, because I've seen it. I've seen the finality of it. I've seen the silver lining now that I've worked through it to a comfortable amount. And so, I think I push myself, but I don't want to push myself in so many different venues that I'm just exhausted. And the quality of my connections with people, or my writing, or, how I show up to work every day is diluted because I'm overextending myself unnecessarily.
You're all in on one thing, but kind of not balancing the other things. Or I think that that's good that you're still like you're I think you see where you're at. You're like, oh, okay, like that is where I'm at. I mean, and it's cool to think of like, I know I don't have all the answers to like finish that chapter that's going to tie in that whole thing that'll even make me start writing it. But just like that knowing of, one day I know that's coming, or that I know that I'm going to be in the position to be the one who needs to write these things for somebody, writing is such a fascinating thing. I always think about like, because some days I'll just, I'm a self-proclaimed poet, and I'll write some, and some days I'm like, oh my God, this is so sick. This is the coolest thing ever. You're the coolest. And the next day I'm like, what the fuck am I talking about? But I think that for me, I've tried to like let go a lot of my like, I always want to identify myself like, oh, I'm a poet, or I'm a writer, and all these things. But I'm like, it doesn't matter. It's like, what do you do that you love? Just do that. I think for me, I like writing. And though there are many days where it's more frustrating than not, I feel like I have this thing, like I know that I'm going to write something that's very important, and I'm sharpening that tool. Like maybe it's not till I'm 65 years old and I'm going to write some like stupid article that's going to make somebody laugh. Maybe that's what it is. But like, I wouldn't be as good as I need to be when I'm 60 if I don't do the work I'm doing today. And it's both enjoyable and frustrating, but writing, man, is so great. I love writing. Do you ever get the so this is a sentence that I say a lot. Sorry, I'm skipping all around, but do you ever get the feeling like, I always say that you don't know what the fuck you think until you think it, or you don't know what the fuck you have to say until you say it. With writing, I'm like, I could write like one subject at the top, and then I'm like, I don't know what I'm writing. But before you know it, you just wrote a whole page of stuff you didn't know. It's like you start just putting the words on paper, and you start kind of like, I don't know who's doing this writing, but he seems to be figuring this out when I get out of the way, you know?
Yeah.
I like that selfless feeling when you're writing, and it's almost like your body, your interior knows what it needs to be said, what needs to fall out onto the paper, but your job is to get there in front of that paper and just keep going and keep letting yourself write. And when distraction comes up, you say, nope, we got to get this thing done. And eventually something inside will get that thing on the paper. You know, do you have a daily writing practice now? Like, do you try to insert a daily writing practice at all, or?
No, I don't. Sometimes I think, well, I mean, I do as of the last couple of weeks, but it's not to improve on my writing. I started doing 10 things I'm grateful for before bed, because I like that. I have nightmares, and extremely lazy person in the morning. I don't like being asked to do anything that requires a lot of thought in the morning. I have my routine, very creature of habit in that way. But supplementing my nightly routine, which is fluid as to when I go to sleep, it's helped my nightmares. It's actually helped me stop dreaming. It's calmed me down before bed, which has been a relief, and it allows me to show up more fresh the next day. Like, I'm actually waking up before my alarm lately. And I think that's because my brain isn't like freaking out over itself and going through all these like nasty little insidious thoughts I've had throughout the day. It's not even trying to digest them anymore. And if it is, it's doing them like behind a veil, and it's not feeling like I need to do that. Like, I'm just focusing on the good. And the few dreams I have had in the last couple of weeks, they've been like quirky, but they've not been nightmares. And so I'm very pleased with how things are going so far.
That's a huge thing. I mean, nightmares are, you know, we hear nightmares all the time. They kind of seem like a kid thing, but dude, nightmares will fuck your life up. Like if you get to the point where you're just constantly having nightmares, you get to the point where you're like, I don't want to go to sleep. Mm-hmm. Like it's not like you're afraid to go to sleep, but it's just like, what's the point? It's literally going to make me feel worse when I wake up. I'm not going to feel rested. I'm just going to give my mind like a new set of energy to work on these shitty thoughts on, you know? What would you be willing to share like a couple of so when you write down 10 things that you're grateful for, like for any listeners that maybe they have nightmares, like what are some kind of things, like do you think like, oh, my house, my family, what do you like to write down?
I do really little things. I mean, I think when I first started trying to do gratitude, like, I don't know, like 8 months ago, I was thinking of like the big things. Like, I was thinking like, well, I'm grateful that I'm smart, and I'm grateful that, you know, I'm healthy. And it's like, they're so vague. Like, it doesn't really register in your brain. Like, well, of course,
telling yourself
you're
these
happy
things
for that. Like, I almost thought about packing it with me. But so I think like last night and almost every night I write something about my cat, because I'm just super grateful for her. So it's
what's your cat's name?
Gigi.
Gigi.
She's awesome, and she's really attuned to me, and she found me as a stray, and so I just have this really unique bond with her. And so almost every day she's kind of joining me when I go to bed. She follows me around like a little shadow, and so I write something about like her. So I write like either that I'm grateful that she is so snuggly when I'm in a bad mood, or I'm grateful that she comes to bed with me every night, or I'm grateful for like the weird little noises that she makes when she's sleeping, or like just like it's very specific, but it's like little things,
right? Like,
not like I'm grateful to have her, which I am, but it's why do I enjoy her? Why do I enjoy the things I have? And so I'll write down like that I got to have ice cream today, or that I was able to make a connection in a very specific way with this student, or my hair was just like, my hair just laid perfect this morning, and there was no struggle, you know, just very.
We forget about those. We get so bummed when it's like a bad hair day, but then we forget to think a good hair day.
Right. And so just super teeny tiny things that are particular to that day. And sometimes I even choose things that didn't go right that day, but like it wakes me up to the times that they have gone right, and I'll still write down, you know, I'm grateful for the friends that feel comfortable just coming over and talking when I don't want to do anything. Even if I got denied that day and someone didn't come over, it makes me think about the last time someone did. I'm like, well, I'm still grateful for when it happens.
Oh, that's beautiful. I like that.
And so that's my spin on it, is just I take, I don't know, 5 to 10 minutes and just whatever pops into my head, I write it down, find a way to word it in like 10 words or less per bullet, and eventually I'll go back and look through it, I'm sure, if I need to. I haven't so far, but I try to write it down and then let it go, and then I'm wondering if I do go back and read it, how many of them will be like repeats or like kind of like different ways of saying the same thing, and maybe I do end up using it for something. Like when you're having a bad day and you need to pick me up, like maybe that will be like a piece of writing at some point for me that I use. It condense hundreds of examples of ways that I've enjoyed, you know, a normal melancholy day, and there's still been good in it, and condense it in down to like an article about like, did you even bother to think about, you know, how your morning went? Did your hair lay down right? Did someone say hi to you? Did someone, you know, I just like having little scraps of things around my room and my life that important. I can modify and make into something later. And when that time comes, it's just like, I just know what to do with it, or I just know where that last thought was written down, and I know which journal to go to. And
I think in a world of in a world of like so much information, so much content, and we have so much fed into us, so much, we like always so quick pace, and we kind of break, like things are going good, we blast past them because like they're good, we don't have to stop, we can keep going, you know. But I think that when we have things in our life or reasons in our life to stop and be grateful for them, it kind of reminds you of like what you're doing this all for, you know. I think that if you're feeling your lowest, but then you're forced to read 100 things that you've written in the last 50 days of things that you literally were grateful for that day, like you're going to pull yourself, you're going to be like, okay, this is just a thing today. I am okay. Like maybe it's a terrible day. It's a real bad day. Maybe lots of bad things. Maybe even some of those things in there like rewound themselves. Like they don't actually equate anymore. But I think that like knowing that I'm more than this moment, like I'm more than like, I'm so exponentially sad right now. But if you have that little reference to look at like, oh yeah, yesterday I had freaking 10 awesome things happen to me though. Like, and it kind of reminds you of like what this life is all about to me. Like it's like life is not inherently good or bad. It's the things that happen and then your reaction to it. It's so easy to get caught with the bad, and that's our survival technique. You know, it's how the news works. It's why it's 24-hour news, and we're like constantly wanting to see these like terrible things that happen because our brains, we're looking out for ourselves, and we're gazelles in a field looking out for a little sound, a little rustle in the weeds. But when you're able to stop and say like, oh, I didn't have lions attack me today, I am so grateful for that. Or I didn't have, you know, or I gotta have a cat, and that's so great. And like, you know, because moments like that, when you're able to look at your cat or your dog or your animal or even your loved one or just somebody in your life, and like, you just look at that motherfucker and you think, God, you make me laugh all the time. You know, you just stare at him. You make me so happy. If you let yourself really follow those thoughts, and kind of almost like if there's bad thoughts coming up, you tell those ones no. You say, I'm not dealing with that right now. And you just think about the good things that sometimes can bring you into a new state. And I think that's a good idea to do before you go to bed. I like that. Yeah,
I can definitely think of both my hands, all the amounts of times that I've been in a very uncomfortable, sensitive place, and I've been crying, you know, in the comfort of my own room, and my cat's come in and done something really obnoxious or quirky or funny, and then it turns from like a cry to a laugh like halfway through. Right. And then just like I'm sitting there like incessantly giggling with myself, and like she doesn't even realize like how silly she looks, and like she's just a cat, and then
doing cat shit.
Yeah, and it's nice. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in things being serious that we overlook that those moments are intended to save us. Like that little thing is supposed to throw a wrench in that for you. Like just that one little thing that can happen that can pull you out of that seriousness. It's like you need to go with it when that happens.
Yeah.
Because it's not good to stay in the sad place. And if you're lucky enough to have that happen in that moment, just go with it. Lean into it.
Yeah.
If it's like you can never, I feel like we can never be led astray by leaning into a good moment. Good moments are going to bring us good things.
Yeah.
They're going to bring us better feelings. They're going to bring us more clarity. It's hard to think critically when you're angry and you're frustrated and you're upset. Like you can't.
Yeah.
And so at least if you're in a positive moment, you can go back to that state of thinking clearly. Even if it's like a little elated, you still are seeing things more accurately, perceiving things in a way that is beneficial to you.
Yeah. I think that I'm able to pull myself out now, like, 2 years ago, started doing better, feeling better. I think I'm able to pull myself out now. Like I can have those little like, oh yeah, you knucklehead, like you were just caught in that thought and like, oh, there's a funny thing, or like, it's not a cat for me, but it's, something else, or probably some YouTube video, or maybe I fart and laugh at my own farts for whatever. I don't even know. But like, I think just noticing, because there is this thing, and I used to get stuck into it, and it's part of it is like for me, it was like, oh, you deserve to feel the sad. But I think that there is this thing where when you're sad and when you're like you feel like you should stay sad. It's almost a comfort in your sadness. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah.
Like this, man, what's that all about? That's an interesting thing that I always like to like.
I think it's like kind of just like that cliche phrase, like misery loves company.
Oh, yeah,
I feel like there's something intoxicating about feeling low. It's easy. Like it's easier to feel low than it is to feel good. Like I don't know how to describe that better.
It is easy, yeah.
I think that there's something really beautiful about feeling the intensity of things. And I feel like that happens a lot more when we're sad than it does when we're happy. I think that joy comes in so many small ways, but it's not frequent that something really excites us and really just overwhelms us with like positivity and enthusiasm. But when it comes to sadness, it's really easy to get overwhelmed by the intensity of sadness. And I think sometimes it's almost a good thing to feel something intensely, especially if you've been kind of living in a haze, that it can be really enticing to spend time in that place.
Yeah, I mean that I was thinking about myself when you were saying that, just thinking about my own like sadness, my own when I was on, and I was like saying this right before, like if you think you need to get on antidepressants, you definitely should check it out. This is not everybody's experience, but antidepressants were very, very bad for me. Like they didn't help me at all. It gave me this feeling of nothing, this like not me feeling, this in between. And again, this is not happening for everybody. Please, like there's different ones too. This was my experience. But there was like I would do cocaine often, and that was kind of my thing. That would be like the one time that I would, in my brain, I'm like, oh, this is like when you get to feel. Like this is when you feel something. Like it's high, of course. But even sadness, sometimes I think maybe we get so numbed. We get so like this feeling of like nothing, like of just this empty sort of weird. It's very hard to describe. Again, we're talking about like words that don't really have. There's so much more to it, but
it's desolate. It's
yeah,
like Courage the Cowardly Dog. Like there's all this nothing, and then there's their farmhouse where all this crazy stuff happens.
Gosh, yeah. And,
maybe if you're like, I love that show so much, but if you're like living in a world that's like that, where there's nothing going on, it's like you kind of have to like make things happen to feel things. And I think that show has a lot of like, they're trying to show like mental illness. Like I think Courage is kind of like mentally ill. Like he has all these things that he's terrified of. He's so scared. He has all this anxiety, and where they live, like nothing should be happening. Sometimes I watch that show and I just think they're in the middle of nowhere. Like, is any of this really real, or is this all like just Courage, like going insane because he's so bored in the middle of nowhere?
Nothing's happening. Gosh, yeah, he's like building his own courage out of it.
Yeah.
Like he's, I want to rewatch that show from a different lens. I really like that show because it is kind of like there's nothing there. There's this nothingness, but like in order to feel something, like the human, the dog in that case, the whatever wants to feel something. And for me, like
something.
There was, I would you do cocaine to feel high, or you drink alcohol to feel, I don't know, numb or laughy or whatever the heck alcohol gives you. But there's also this like feeling sad was literally better than feeling nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a crazy thing, and that's hard to conceptualize. I think that maybe that might not make a lot of sense to people, but the feeling of nothing seems to me like, I don't know if worse is the right answer, but it just seems so very far different and so detached from like the human experience is like, I would rather feel that almost sadness than nothing.
I would
it's
agree.
A weird. That's heavy.
Yeah, I mean, people are driven insane from like the sound of nothing, being put in a soundproof room where eventually you start getting attuned to your blood pulsing and your heart beating. The conceptualization of nothing going on, no visual, no audio that you can alter.
Right.
It gets really monotonous, it gets really repetitive, and people are driven insane from being in solitary, where there's
solitary
nothing.
Is crazy. I think it's like the worst thing we do.
So unhealthy to be in the dark, to be where there's no sound, to be where there's no semblance of life aside from you. It makes you really start to like realize how much you need outside experiences to kind of filter in and distract you from yourself. I think that nothing is terrifying. Like, to think that there would be nothing. I think that's why I like so many of these crazy like folklore and beliefs, because in some way I'm like, well, I hope we're not the only ones. Like, can we really say that we're like the smartest things out there? I hope not.
Yeah, geez. I really hope not. We don't have it figured out. We just pretend we do.
No, I mean, we've had so much time. Like, I mean, not like us specifically, but there's been so many eras of like humans. You think we would have a lot more stuff figured out by now. I feel like we only really started developing ways of doing things like 150 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we have so much like you go to New York or go to any of these places, like, oh my gosh, humans and culture is so amazing. But then we have like the same people who built those skyscrapers are just like, they don't understand their own emotions, which is, you're born with those. It's like the first thing you think that we would learn. Like it's obviously it's right in my goggles. It's right where I'm at. So I see like, oh, like human emotions, and we're learning about all these things, but it kind of feels like humans as a species are just more recently figuring out like, oh yeah, we are consciousness, and we're fucking, oh yeah, everything that we're saying happens through this brain. And like, we're starting to figure out that we can like actually, oh yeah, all these things these hands that we're using to build these giant skyscrapers, like what are the hands all about? Wait, what's that? It's a crazy cool time to be alive. That's for sure.
I can't spend like a lot of time in my head thinking about all of my like I have a small portion of it that I can serve for it, but like for my conspiracy or like my Big Bang theories or like whatever, like I put those in like a smaller region because I can get so overwhelmed just trying to like piece together with what little evidence I have, or what understanding I have of like time. I don't have enough to conceptualize it, and it makes your brain not literally hurt, but you get really lost really quickly.
Yeah. I do that to myself often.
I've had instances in my life where something has happened around me, or I've picked up on something that's about to happen around me, and I've had moments of feeling like I have some psychic abilities, or I have just like a really strong intuition, or a really aware gut feeling, or something. We call it so many different things. But what it boils down to, I think, is why do we randomly understand things that are outside of our actual knowledge? Like, why do we sometimes randomly just have an understanding or an awareness of things that are typically outside of our reach, or we haven't made it there yet? And I love bounce around the idea of like consciousness, like that there has to be something else.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like, I think that one of my favorite words is wonder. Like, I think it's the most important thing. Like to me, the greatest thing you can give to a kid is wonder. Like I don't know, man, it could be this, but you're gonna have to learn for yourself. Like, I don't know either, but because nothing is super solid. Like we're just, this whole thing, we're just assuming that we know, and there's some people that say they know, but I don't know. You know, I think that having wonder is like because I'm someone who likes novelty. I love like learning about like new shit, and it's like, oh, something new. Oh, something new shiny object. Like, I love having that wonder of like that feeling right before something conceptualizes, like you're, whether it's a true thing or whether it's like I can understand how that person thinks that way. Or like, oh, that's what they mean when they say that. Like, okay. And just allow, like, that's like one of the most incredible things about being human is your ability to wonder, and just kind of like, you don't really have to have the answers, and you don't have to talk to people who have the answers, but like nowadays you can read books and you can watch YouTube and you can read articles and all these things, and just, you know, explore your mind.
Sometimes I feel like when you get the answer to something, it suddenly makes it dull or boring.
Mm-hmm.
And so there have been lots of times that I have had conversations with people and I've had the opportunity to get an answer and just refrained.
Oh.
And not often, but sometimes I'm just like, I feel happier being curious about this than I would to know an absolute.
Yeah, I think so too. I think remaining in that curious state is a cool place to be. Like, to where, well, I mean, like with this podcast, I always like to remain in disbelief. Like, I don't fully know what I believe. I don't think anybody does, but like, well, but like, just having this, I'm going to take that on, like right at this moment. Like, if you're describing to me, like your beliefs and your, like, if you were incredibly religious, I would be, and you're explaining it to me in like your truest way, I would take that in this moment and be like, oh, okay, like I want to absorb it as deep as I can and really try to just like, okay, so that's what you think. Okay, you know, try to piece it together. But you're right. I'm not looking for this like understanding of like this final thing that I'm, okay, that's it. You can leave now. That's what I wanted. You know, it's not like that. It's life is peculiar enough to where you can just kind of remain in disbelief and kind of maybe not fully try to fully comprehend things to where it's like, this is the absolute answer and I'm living my life from this point now on, but just exploring and remaining in disbelief of like what other people think about the world. And
yeah, this might be not exactly like on note with like what we're talking about, but I think about it from time to time, often enough that it's still, you know, influential, something that I'm curious about. But I don't know that I would ever want there to be research out there disproving that there is kind of like an in-between for people who pass over. If it was saying that there was, I would not mind that. But if they're saying like an absolute, like there is no, you know, semblance of their soul left on
Right.
earth, you know, as soon as they pass. Because I had this experience when I was in 3rd grade that my grandparents would pick me up from Kessler on every Wednesday. And they were late one day, and they weren't traditionally late. And I was outside and I heard someone who sounded like a grandmother, like just like kind of like that grandmother voice, but it wasn't my grandmother's voice, saying my name, but it sounded familiar. Like I trusted in it. And then I was looking around for this person who was like saying my name over and over again. And they weren't just saying Micah, they were saying Micah Lynn. They were saying my full name. And I'm like, nobody calls me that. And there's literally no one in the courtyard in the space who's looking at me. There's no adults out there who know me, you know. It was just so weird. And then my grandparents pulled up and it stopped as soon as they pulled up. And so I got in the car with them, and then I thought about it, and it sounded like my grandmother's mother, who had passed away when I was like 5. So I guess 2 or 3 years before that at the time. And I just kind of always have thought like, I don't know if I was just hearing things, but it was a lot It was a lot more clear than I would have anticipated it if I was just hearing things and I wasn't thinking about her. Like I wasn't like sitting there mourning over her. Time had passed. I didn't know her that well. But when I really thought about it, and I was like, that sounded a lot like her, and it stopped just as soon as I could see their car pulling in. It stopped. And so I don't know. I don't want there to be like research out there that comes out that says absolutely not. That's not a possible thing.
Right.
Like it's all in your head. You know, I like to remain curious about maybe that's a possibility.
What if? Yeah, I mean, like, because that's peculiar. Like, hearing it, and then where your head was like, oh, is that like your great grandma? Is that what it'd be?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that connection. Like, where would that? Like, how would you know that? You know, like that's an intuition, a feeling, like of like, I don't really know why I think maybe it's this person, but like it seems to make sense or whatever. I think that a lot of times, you know, when it comes to research and like facts and all that stuff, we do get kind of, you know, it's a dangerous line to just like, you can't just refute science and refuse science, but like science is not the only thing that exists. Science explains a lot of like, you know, physics and there's a lot of things that really map out, but science has no room for spirituality. Science has no room for wonder. And I don't think, you know, when it comes to research and like refuting things, I don't think that like that can be taken away, because like what, like even so even if there's like a paper, you read a paper tomorrow and they're like, whatever they say, it's like, there's absolutely no way that essentially that there's no afterlife or in between or whatever. Like, what does that mean to you? Like, you still have this experience. Like, like all of a sudden that's not real. Like, that's real.
I know, I probably wouldn't believe it. Probably just be like, okay.
I think we have a lot of stuff in our life that we don't feel like we're allowed to fully believe that like's happened to us, you know, because there's not like, it's weird, or it's like we don't really have like a comfortable like platform to talk about it on. But I think it's like, it's important to follow those things. I don't know. Like, do you think about that moment often?
Yeah.
Does it pop up?
Yeah, I think about it every couple of months or so, probably.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I've had other moments, and I kind of briefly explained to you like my different jumps into, you know, I've seen psychics, I've seen mediums, I've been seeing a medicine woman, I've been to a hypnotherapist. Like, I've really tried to dive into the parts of myself that I don't understand in other realms that I don't know, that I'm not certain are present or not, or, you know, what they can bring. But in all my experiences, I've found myself in just like shock and surprise that these people are bringing forward things from my subconscious. They're saying things as if they're just reading them from me.
Wow.
And it's like, I don't think that my expression was conveying these very specific details. Like the psychic that I went and saw, it was probably about 5 years ago. She told my friend that she was pregnant and that she would meet the love of her life in September. And she was a week pregnant and didn't know it.
Wow. That's intense.
And she had her son in September, early September. And she was in no way, shape, or form thinking that was even a possibility. And I forced her to go and take pregnancy tests at Walmart. And she's like, no, I'm not doing it. And I'm like, well, if you don't think it's true, like if you don't think it's a real thing, then what harm does it do to you? It's like, just do it for me. I'll pay for them. And 4 pluses. And so she also told me that there were people in the room with us and explained who they were and their mannerisms and their behaviors. And she told me like directly who they were and then explained about them. And even for one of them, she said was my mom's mom, who I never met. And I asked her to describe the woman she was looking at. And I wrote down in my notes and I took it home to my mom and I was like, who does this sound like to you?
Wow.
Like the shape of her nose, her hair, her stature, her mannerisms, the way she was speaking, her candor, you know. And my mom was like, it sounds like my mom. And it was just like, I don't know. I've had some kooky experiences that I wouldn't have believed unless I had them myself, but it's just really made me open up to there's a lot I don't understand and I may never understand. Maybe that's better for my sanity. But there's so much out there that I can't say a definitive, like, yes, there's an answer to this, or no, this isn't possible.
Well, but I think that search to see, like, to try to figure yourself out, like the fact that you went to all those, like you went to a psychic and you went to these different things, like, I like to encourage anybody to like just do like what, like if you have an intuition, like I wonder if like maybe like a psychic would kind of like tell me what's going on, like go to a psychic. Like, or I wonder if like, I mean, I encourage people towards like, if religion is your forte, if Christianity is like, there's this church down the road and like, I kind of just want to go sit in the back for it. Like, dude, do it. Please do it. If you have a friend who like does palm readings and does tarot cards or tarot. I don't know why I said tarot. I think there is a T at the end.
It is.
But like, dude, dude, like if you have an intuition or a feeling in your stomach, like maybe that's kind of interesting to you, and like you don't have to choose that you're fully gonna like I'm gonna whatever they say I'm gonna do, and that's my life, and like you don't have to do that. But I just think encouraging people to like pursue these little thoughts of like, there's a reason why you think you're kind of drawn to certain styles of whatever. You know, for some people it's energy work, and some people, like I said, it's religion, and some people it's just science. You know, if these, you can pursue these things and then they have instances where they start to make sense. Like, you know, what is real? Like real in what's truth? Who tells you truth? You know, what the first person who made America, is he the person who says truth is truth? You got to understand this world is complicated, listener. I think man, I think it's super cool that you did that. I have not been to like a psychic or anything like that, but it definitely fascinates me. I think that it's something like if I was a listener on this podcast, I would be someone like, I should go check those people out. You know, like why not? Why not? Go check it out.
And I do want to be very clear that, you know, because of my background in psychology, I'm a behaviorist by nature. I like the science. I like some fortified evidence or database, or I like that, it's looked at in some skepticism in that way. And so when I go to these things, I go in with an open mind that I'm not going to shut out anything that happens and be like, oh, no way, like I can't handle that. Like that, this is, you know, some light tricks or whatever. Yeah. Like I'm not going to do that, but I'm also going to come in being a little bit skeptical. And that's why I get down to the nitty gritty. And I've gone in and I've tried to throw loopholes. Like the first time I went to the psychic, I was in a relationship and I took off my promise ring and I went in as though I was single, and I chose not to even address my relationship at all. And she kept bringing it up. She's like, are you in a relationship? And I said, no, I'm not. And she's like, you want to try that again?
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, well, yeah, I am seeing someone. And so she's like, well, it's pretty serious because his grandfather is here and he wants to talk to you.
Oh, whoa.
And and we were talking about him earlier, and I don't want to say his name, but his grandfather had passed away, and he was someone that he was really close to. And he talked about his grandfather a lot to me, if not more than his own parents. And so it was just interesting that I'm like, really? Like that family member. And he'd had other ones, like, I don't know, just so many uncanny things that even if I went in and I tried to lie, or I tried to provide reasons to be skeptical, or I asked for descriptions of things, I've just always been met with like such transparency and such dead on information that I'm like, I'm blown away. Like I tried. I didn't come in like all googly eyed, like, oh my gosh, if you tell me I'm great with animals, I'm going to be like, oh, you're so psychic. Like,
you got me pegged.
And I've had those. I've been to those before, but there's been some really cool ones that I'm like, you're really perceptive in a way that I can't explain or begin to understand. Because even if my face says I'm lying and you call me out on it, like you're still saying things after the fact that I'm like, how would you even have known?
Right. Gosh, that's such an interesting place to be as a human, because like the one thing, like our WWE world we walk around and live in, you know, our weird reality that we like can't say our true feelings and stuff, like it terrifies everybody to like know that you can go into a room and like that psychic, that person, or whoever they are, like they know what's going on inside. Like they know your real things. Like it makes us, we're like, oh, I don't want that. You know, that's probably why it's so scary, is it's a whole level of understanding that we don't understand.
I don't think that anyone should enter into like a spiritual realm without an open mind and without some forgiveness for themselves for whatever comes out, because things might be said or advocated for or warned. I've been warned before
Ooh, that's a scary sentence, a scary word in that situation.
You know, you need to come in just really being open-minded and with forgiveness for yourself, because it is intense, and there might be things divulged about you that you have purposely kept from people, but because you have purposely kept them from people, they have been an obsessive thought in your mind. So they're one of the most obvious ones to someone who can kind of like pluck those significant
He's coming for that.
things from yourself. Exactly. Because you're either, you know, you're obsessing about and fixating on the things that you're really passionate about, and they'll be at the forefront, and you'll openly state them with people, and you'll want to talk about them in your conversations and gravitate towards that. But there's also the things that we're like, I don't want anybody to know about this. And so because they're always thinking like, keep your mouth shut, you know, about this, like don't bring it up, or if people bring up something relevant, like change the topic.
Divert
like
it, yeah.
You're still obsessing, you're still fixating. You want to make sure that that stays hidden, but you want to be aware of it so that you never say anything that gives part of it away. Yeah,
it's constantly eating at you. I have things in the same realm. I have the things that I was just talking with a couple friends, Shaylee and another friend, about just stuff that happened in my childhood, and like realizing how often it was on my mind before I had talked to them about it. But it's interesting to think that like you would walk into a psychic and they're like, oh, I see that first thing. Like, that's the thing that you're trying to say no about, and I see it. It's interesting.
It's intimidating, but I've walked away with a lot of relief.
Right.
That I'm like, okay, someone gets it, and I don't know, just good people. I don't think a lot of people are out to be tricksters, especially if they want to like make a business out of themselves. We have Yelp now. Like if you're not doing like legit business, people will run your business down.
What are the Yelp reviews for psychics? Those are probably like pretty brutal. Like it's like people like, sorry, I pointed out that thing you don't like about yourself, but you didn't have to write a Yelp review.
Right. Yeah, I could see that being a problem.
Well, gosh, I'm just thinking about how I don't want to go see a psychic now. I'm like, you're going to see right through me. I'm just like nervous about I'm not even there. I'm like, oh man, what are you going to know about me? That's how it goes though. I think that like accepting and finding any sort of like whatever way is calling to you. And by calling to you, it's like this intuition. And by intuition, it's this fucking feeling that you brush off all the time. And this little feeling of like, I wonder if like this could help me in this area. And I'm just encouraging anybody to go and check those things out and try them out. Like, I mean, like meditation and yoga is something that like at the beginning I thought it was really cool and I liked learning about it, but I didn't want to try it. And even that is like, you follow this little intuition of being interested in it, and then it can kind of show you things about yourself. You did mention hypnosis. I haven't done in-person hypnotism or hypnosis, but I have done on the internet, on YouTube, quite a few times, and I've actually had some fucking profound experiences with hypnosis. I have I have childhood trauma, and so there was a lot of that. I actually had a time where, so this wasn't directly from the hypnosis, but it was essentially, Shaylee was out of town for like 3 or 4 days. She was down in San Diego, and I was like, this is, I'm doing this. I'm doing the fucking childhood trauma things. I'm going to have a conversation. I'm going to do this. I'm doing all the hypnosis. I was like, I'm going. And it was right when I was setting the studio up, and I actually unboxed these big speakers behind me, and this table wasn't here, but I set them on the ground. And for fucking like 3 or 4 days, I was just like smoking crazy amounts of weed, taking a ton of CBD, listening to crazy frequencies, doing like meditations, hypnosis. Like this was, and I don't recommend people do this. This was fucking insane. I'm just crazy. But like I literally had, and again, like so. I'm halfway joking about this, but I'm like, the way our minds work, this was a very beneficial thing. Like, yes, I was super high and I was just doing yoga, and yeah, I'm getting weird and I'm by myself and whatever. But like, I legitimately had experiences of, like you go through and you could do like a healing trauma or healing your inner child hypnosis, sort of things like that. And I had genuine like visions, or I made up the vision and it seemed to work out and it seemed to help me and help me heal, of seeing my younger self in this room with me and hugging him and saying like, it's okay. You're done now. Like I'll take it from here. And I had these like profound, and I just fucking cried for hours. Like I just like let go of this terrible thing that I was holding on to. You know, again, backing up to like truth and what's real and stuff, that helped me. Like whatever the fuck that was that I did after these hypnosis and the meditation and whatever, it helped me. And like what, you know, I don't have to argue with somebody that what I saw was real. It was real to me, and it helped me get through experiences and kind of like take over my life as a man and like let my boy side go, you know? But so that's my, like, I have a couple other like crazy experiences with hypnosis. One time I experienced the color fuchsia. I experienced the color purple, and I experienced it as in I was the fucking color purple. And this was, I wasn't on psychedelics. This was, again, there was crazy, if you look up online, like binaural beats and the frequencies, like that's all a whole nother realm of like, be careful with that. It's cool, but you can do too much for sure. But I experienced the color purple. I hugged myself as a younger child. Like these are things that like made me feel happy and made me feel better in my life. That's my experience with hypnosis. What is your...
That's so radical.
Yeah. Do you have anything similar to that at all? Or, I mean, obviously this is yoga and weed and CBD and frequencies, but that's what works for me. That's just how it helped. Right. And I don't, and I do well by myself. I'm pushing against that edge now, and I'm knowing when to ask for help, but that was how I got help, was with myself and YouTube. But
does that continue recording even if it looks like it's not moving?
Yes, it certainly does.
Okay.
Yeah. I know it's the screen catches up to it, and then it's like, you're probably not looking. You're good. I need to take that, half my episodes, I take that dang thing down so you don't have to be distracted by it. Sorry about that, but next time I'll take it down so you aren't distracted.
So you just asked like what my experience was?
Hypnosis, yeah.
So that was unfortunately like the biggest letdown out of all the venues I've gone through. Which I had the most faith in because I was like, this is science. Like, right. I can trust in science. But I went to a hypnotherapist. I think it was in Battleground, Woodland, Battleground. I don't know. And this is about 4 years ago. And he was male. And I felt kind of nervous because he was a man. And that's just formed from like, I felt like I was coming in because of something that happened from a man. Mm-hmm. But it took me some time, and I was able to relax, and he was able to put me under, and I could feel myself half in and half out. But he said it would kind of be that way because I would still be like talking with him and whatnot. And so he brought me through this garden to a door, and that was just my particular vision of it. And he'd be like, okay, when we open the door, we're going to see what it is you've been burying from, your waking life. And every time we opened that door, it would be pitch black, and I would like peek in, and then as soon as I would like blink in that state, I wouldn't blink for real, my eyes were closed the whole time, I would be back at the start of the garden. And he brought me to that door several times, and then what felt like I was under for maybe like 15, 20 minutes. He had me under for like 80 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And I think he said that he's like, we really tried to process this a bunch of different ways. And he's like, you might not remember all of them. And he's like, you never got anything. He's like, you saw blackness every single time. And so he told me that left me with two possibilities. Either I'm trying to remember something that didn't actually happen, or it happened the way I thought it happened. Or it's just so deeply buried that I'm not ready to deal with it yet. And my body is saying like, quite literally, like, no, leave it alone. We're not addressing this today. So I walked away from that pretty frustrated. I thought maybe there wasn't a lot of things to be established about it. But then I had experiences after that made me realize that I do think there's something there that I haven't been able to access yet. And then just most recently, with like going to the medicine woman and trying to develop like skills in Reiki, she was looking at like my field, and I can't remember what she called it, but like the space that starts on the outside of our body and goes to about like 1.5 to 2 feet out, things that are in your field but not a part of you. And it was kind of like she would like look around me like she was looking at a computer screen and like look at different things or like move things in the air. It's so interesting to like just watch her at work. But she, toward the end of my visit, she like looked up at something that was like above diagonal left in my field, and she's like, okay, but we're gonna address that later. And I was like, do I get to know what that is? And she's like, you're well aware that it's there, but you're not ready to deal with it yet. And she's like, when we start working on some of like your self-healing that you really need to get through to establish that that good base, that good understanding, that forgiveness for yourself, then I can let you know what that is and why you feel so uncomfortable.
It's pretty powerful for her, you know, as like just a professional in her field, like that, like whoever that was, like that seems like a pretty like sturdy and powerful thing to say, really. Like, oh, I see this thing, but I'm not going to put you through that right now. You know what I mean? Like that. Yeah. It seems like a very just noble thing to say. I guess I respect that.
And I feel comfortable sharing her. Her name is Melody Ann. She's in Vancouver, and she's very sweet. And she has tons of different classes for different reasons, and she's very personable. She has these 2 dogs that help her. They actually do like therapy on other pets and stuff.
Oh my God. What's her address?
So she's phenomenal, but her dogs are particularly funny because when she's doing her stuff at work, like they start doing these odd things and making noises or like pawing at different body parts while I'm sitting there.
Oh, wow.
Or like every time, you know, it's so uncanny that they are like in tune with her, like in tune with like the vibes in the room. That every time we touched on something that was particularly painful for me or like did strike a nerve in some way, she's very gentle about it. Like I never reacted like emotionally, but so physically and outwardly, I would not do anything except for maybe like an expression that indicates to her like, yes, like she knows what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. But every time something was like that, it happened 2 or 3 times. One of her dogs came over and like rested his head on my knee. And only in those moments when I had that intense emotion was he like already walking over and like nudging me and resting his head on my knee and being like, I'm here. And so
we always say dogs know anyway, right? Like
that their animals are awesome. If you can really just be kind and compassionate towards especially like domesticated animals, because they already kind of have those skills in them to want to interact with humans in a positive way. Right. You know, as much as I would love to go like hug a raccoon, I don't think it would go over so well.
Dude, baby raccoons are so cute though.
But baby ones, yes.
Oh man.
Mama ones, I don't know.
Yeah, they're just garbage eating pandas.
But yeah, I think that I'm kind of sold on a few of the different venues just because I've had such good experiences that even if I didn't get to continue any further, I would recommend it to other people.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's great. Thanks for sharing your experiences with both of those, for sure. I think that like I always like leading people in the direction of like whatever's going to heal you. Like we get caught up way too quickly with what's real or what's true or what's weird or what's whatever. Like, dude, fuck everybody else. Go there by yourself. Go wherever by yourself. Walk into the church by yourself. Walk into the Reiki healer by yourself. Walk in to the yoga studio by yourself. Like whatever's like calling to you for you to take the next stage or the next step in your life and your healing, or even if it's not even that and it's just something you want to check out, like just open your mind and just really try your best to walk in there with an open mind and like maybe experience it.
I feel like everyone, I want to make a bold enough statement. I feel like everyone can agree that the unplanned, spontaneous nights or days that you've had, you can recall were like some of the best. You had no expectations, you had no standards, things just seamlessly kind of worked out. If things went wrong, it was like hilarious, or that it wasn't like a bad experience, even though like things were like not going with, you know, even the little plan that you did have. And I feel, where was I going with that? Oh, I totally had a connection. It was kind of like a loose one, but.
Rounded out, was it just about how those situations, like you think that they're going to be a bigger deal and they end up just being smooth? And
it was just simply going into things by yourself, all the opportunities that it brings to you. Like if you're with another person and you're you know, either matching their energy or you're in their bubble too, and you guys are kind of creating something together, it's not just you anymore and it's not just what you need. So you might not get as much out of experiences if you spend it connected with someone else.
Ooh.
Spending the whole night with them, spending the evening with them. When you go to festivals, I always make it a point to run off by myself at least for a couple hours every day, because you come back to your friends if you've all run off and done your own thing. Everyone had like I mean, it's easier at a festival too because there's so much going on, but you all had your own experiences. Some of you went off and tried some new thing. Some of you made new friends. Some of you spent the whole time dancing and like made like a new romantic interest, but like you all went off and experienced different things that were things you truly wanted to experience. And sometimes it's just being solitary and someone went and took a nap and it was just like the best dream they ever had. And I've had experiences like that, not quite as fun, you know, just in like the normal public here, but going to a movie by myself, going to a restaurant by myself. I choose to sit at like the bar stools at a restaurant where someone can sit next to me, or I intentionally sit next to someone else regardless of what they look like. And I end up having really interesting conversations with strangers. And although I'm not always on board for doing that, and sometimes I need my space, I would always advocate for people trying things on their own, especially if it's something they really want to do and they can't easily find someone to join them, instead of like rejecting the idea because it's intimidating. If you go and do it on yourself, I think like the universe is going to match that with something that you're going to find worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree. I think so. It's gonna give you the answer. Like that person's gonna see. I'm a very like my DIY. I'll do it myself sort of. I always have enjoyed doing things by myself. I've always been I like to wake up before other people at the festival and go for a walk. You know, or I like to. Like if I did Coachella a lot of times, I went with a big group, but we would get there and we're at the festival and I'd be like, okay, I'll meet you guys in in 3.5 hours. I'm gonna go because I'm like, I really want to follow, like I genuinely want to see this thing. So I'm gonna go by myself, and just that going by yourself, there's this weird feeling of like, especially if you've been like codependent or you've always like had somebody around, or if you're somebody who uses your phone a lot too, is even it's like a feeling of like you think people are watching you. Maybe sometimes maybe it's a feeling of self-conscious, like when you're alone. It's a feeling of like this gosh, what is that feeling when you're like you've been with somebody, like you're always with somebody, but then you're like kind of uncomfortable, but you're like, I know I want to do this alone. You know, I think just if you just sit with that feeling and you realize that it's not so bad, and you can kind of turn it into a little dance move. Like it's like that feeling, that unknowing, that like, ooh, I don't know, I want somebody with me, or I want to text somebody right now. Like just sitting with that feeling by yourself, I think is good.
And I mean, when you lay your head down at night, and for a lot of sometimes part of your day, even if it's just driving, like you are by yourself. Like you only really have yourself and your thoughts and your experiences. Those are the only things that you can begin to see the full scope of. Your perceptions, the things that are yours. And so you have to get comfortable with being by yourself, or like you're going to have some pretty unnerving things. And I feel like there was a time when I was younger that I just had this massive fear of abandonment that, I mean, was validated. I had it. I know why I had it, but it's essentially useless. Right. I mean, if there was a time that I really was abandoned, if there was this crazy plane crash when I'm on my way to a vacation and I survived somehow, and I'm by myself with no understanding of how I'm going to get back to civilization, how do you make the most of something like that? Like, it comes back to that choice. Do you want to survive this to see if someone comes to rescue you, or do you give up? You can go drown yourself. Yeah. I mean, it's an option.
Just go lay there. Just have that breakdown. Choose that.
Are you comfortable knowing that, 5 minutes after you drown yourself, a helicopter comes and lands on the island, or as you're drowning and you're too far out to say, like, I just think of things like in really big ways sometimes, but it helps me understand that like the big picture is all the littler pictures too.
Right.
It's, you want to be the survivor. Like, why don't you, like Castaway was like actually brilliant. Like drawing a face on a volleyball and treating it like it was another person. That saved him from becoming insane. He wasn't insane because of it. You need interaction. You need something. And because maybe there wasn't a lot of animals on that island, or if there had been, they weren't, nice, friendly animals that you can make a pet. You need to do something to keep yourself agile, keep yourself interested in your own things, what you now have accessible to you. So if that's making this really extravagant shelter and finding ways to do things for yourself and building really that functional value in yourself, like
resilience.
If you get saved, you can take that back and teach people how to build tree huts for vacations, and then now you're making money. Like, I don't know. I don't think I felt this way back in high school, and I definitely didn't feel this way growing up. But I just have felt the last couple of years that there's really no alternative for me. And I like meeting other people that think the same way, that have experienced the lows, and they've just decided there is no alternative. Like, no matter what the circumstances, I'm going to choose to do something with it and see things out to its natural course, its natural finality.
Yeah, I think and we seem to always surprise ourselves too. Like, if you can just get through that discomfort in those moments, you could just do what you think is right, and you'll surprise yourself. Like the inevitable, like if you're on an island, your plane crashed, like, oh my gosh, can you imagine like the terrible thoughts that you'd have? Like, but you'd be like, well, I gotta keep going. I'm not gonna drown. I'm not gonna die. I'm not gonna give up. I mean, and you're gonna level up. You're gonna get better at building huts. You're gonna get better at whatever. I mean, in Tom Hanks in that one, he got better. Like, he worked out. I was thinking about, as you're doing like the Wilson thing, I did a lot of when I was, because I had no idea that like I was not my thoughts. Like, when I was like super depressed and suicidal, like that didn't make sense to me. Like, I thought that every thought that came up was like, what are you talking about? That's me. Like, I'm doing what my thoughts say. Like, what are you talking about? Like, but when you like taking that Wilson and like talking to him, like sometimes you figure out what the hell you have to say when you write it. We talked about writing. Like, sometimes you don't know what you're saying until you're writing, and then you're halfway through the paper. You're like, oh, that's what I think. You know, I mean, sometimes you need to make a Wilson and you need to talk to him. You know, sometimes like me, I was like me versus my depression. Like, oh no, that's a depression thought. That's a bad thought, Jake. Don't do that. Like, what is that thought? You take a look at it, you know? But
it's outside of yourself. And I want to make a metaphor out of this.
Oh, nice.
If someone hasn't coined it, I want to coin this. Teachers talk about students needing the tools. You need the tools materialistically to be a good learner. You need a pencil, you need a paper, you need a tablet, you know, you need whatever it is. You need the person to teach you who knows what they're trying to teach you. You know, you can't just learn everything from scratch. You need it to come from somewhere. But you also need the emotional tools to be present and to work through things without verbalizing it to someone else. You need to have the strength and the confidence to seek things out for yourself and remain curious. Like, you need, and I want to focus on like specifically the emotional tools. You need your emotional toolkit. I tell this with like little kids. It's just how we describe it. But adults need that emotional toolkit to survive adulthood, where you feel more alone than you probably ever felt. Like, even as a kid, you could have felt alone depending on your home life. But as an adult, you really see these things happen. You end up living by yourself. You end up outside of other people, and, you know, even friends and family who care for you, not making a lot of time for you because we're all going in all these crazy different directions with different schedules. When you're alone and you start to feel isolated and you start to feel like people aren't making time for you, it can kind of feel like you really are as isolated as if you're the one on an island. Even if you're reaching out to people and you're not getting hits back, or they're not calling you back, or they keep saying, no, I'm busy this weekend. And if anyone's ever had a day where they just literally could find no one to hang out with, but that's what you wanted so badly, that feeling of isolation, you tried and it's inconceivable that day. You need to have, like, on the island, you would want literal tools to help you. You would want some piece of sharp metal that can help you cut down trees. But you would also need like your emotional tools, your mental stability to say, this is not great. I don't have a lot here, but I have my intelligence. I have my curiosity. I have my creativity. Like, I have these things a part of me that cannot be taken from me unless there's, like, say, physical limitation, and you have, no capability to move yourself or strength, but you need your emotional toolkit to get you through those random days where you feel isolated or you feel overly sensitive. You need to keep reevaluating within yourself, not needing to ask people like, was this a mean thing that someone did, or am I just being crazy? You need to be able to do that inside yourself and be like, are we just sensitive right now? Like, do we
Yeah.
really think that this person meant that? And do we need to address it if there's someone that we're close to? Do we need to bring this up when we're feeling more calm about it and be like, do you really feel that way about me? Like, where is that coming from? Because it's not going to help our friendship sustain, if we don't address this.
Yeah. Dude, the emotional toolkit is so important. I think, because I kind of have I've built my emotional toolkit is fucking beefy, man. I'm proud of my emotional toolkit. Like I have days where I wake up, like I said, and I'm just like, oh, I'm not good. But my emotional toolkit says like, all right, bro, you don't feel the best today. That's okay. You got this. What do you need to do? And then my emotional toolkit, I'm like, all right, I got to work out. I got to do yoga. I got to meditate. I got to, like, my emotional toolkit extends to like things that I can do too. But even before that, it's your emotional toolkit is sometimes, to me, like this voice that you add in, which is the real you to me, of like this, like whether it's Tony Robbins or it's Eric Thomas or it's like one of these like intense people, like, come on, motherfucker, you got this. Like, okay, my plane crashed. Done. My plane's crashed. That's done. I can't do anything about it. What's next? I can do this. Instead of this like, oh, my plane crashed. What am I going to do? And you just curl up in a ball on the ground. You can build up your emotional toolkit to where he starts kicking in too. He starts like when problems arise, he's tough, oh gosh, what's his name? CT Fletcher, I think. He's like one of the big, like a bodybuilder, weightlifter. He has this thing. Within the last couple of years, he got a heart transfer. And he says it's so this is another strange thing. He got a heart transfer, and he's a motivational speaker. He's like, his thing is like, you got one more set, or it's still your set. If you've ever heard that, I don't know. It's in the bodybuilding world. Like if you're, I don't know if you bodybuild all the time or what, but it's his thing. It's like, it's still your set. Like if you said you're going to do 10 and you only did 8, like get back down and do your 2. Like it's his thing. But so he got this heart transplant. He had like heart failure or whatever. And he has I think he said it was like a young Asian lady's heart that he got. And his thing is he when he's feeling discouraged or he doesn't feel like he's got it or he doesn't want to get out of bed or whatever he's got, he says, come on, lady, we got this. And he talks to his heart, that lady's heart. And he says, come on, lady, we got this. And I don't know if that's exactly what you mean by emotional toolkit. I was kind of extending it into mine, but
it can mean a lot of things.
Resilience.
I think a lot of things are just someone's perception of something, and that's your perception of what your emotional toolkit has to offer, and like the ways that you've connected with something that someone else has utilized. I think that's great. I think everything when it comes to emotions, it's just ambiguous. Right. I mean, so many emotions go into each other. You need emotional toolkits for all of the things, and we build on our own at different levels. Right.
I have another emotional toolkit idea that I was thinking about.
Okay.
And I do. So on the inside of my glasses, I have printed lion, and that's the thing that I write on the inside of my left hand all the time is lion, Lion. And that's just an animal to a lot of people, but to me, I've given that word power, and to me that means like straighten up, your chest back, put your arms back, put your chest out. Like you got this. It's like I've like given that single word, like it has so much meaning because I have built that over time. And I think that it's like a lot of people can find words like, I suppose religious people have their versions of those words that they've read. I'm like, okay, this is what that means. And they take that on. But I think that we can make up our own words of like what's, like if your plane crashes, like me, if my plane crashes and I'm on the island and I'm like sad, it's like if I just told myself like, all right, lion, you got this, you're a lion. Like that would give me, all right, man, I'm super bummed right now, but the best way I'm going to solve this problem is if I put my chest out and I look around, I'm like, okay, what are my options? What are my resources? Do I have a shelter? Like these things, lion, so listener, if you're listening, if you don't have a word or a mantra, a lot of times people, emotional toolkit, whatever that means to you, if any of these things that we talked about, if they pop up like a dorky idea, man, build that idea, build it, put some more Legos on it. Yeah.
Mantras are powerful.
Do you have any mantras, and then also your emotional toolkit? Do you have any of your personals that you can think of? Or
I utilize mantras all the time.
Yeah,
I talk to myself in the mirror a lot. especially when I'm doing my makeup. I mean, like as a girl, I got a lot of time in front of a mirror. I have hair, I have makeup, I have skincare. You know, I sometimes even just like to sit in front of my mirror when I'm doing my nails or other things, or I've made that spot in my room cozy for myself, and it's my like feel better about yourself station. So we're literally making ourselves feel good, making ourselves feel pretty, or utilizing some creativity, but also sitting there and hyping myself up, listening to good music, listening to a podcast, talking to myself, thinking about what I have to do for the day and how I'm going to get it done. What I was going to say is that my word has become like grit or sisu, and they're kind of like the same thing, but sisu is it's one of my heritages. I don't want to fudge up which one it is. It's Finnish, I think. I believe it's Finnish. But just to have that grit, and grit isn't being good at anything except for not giving up. Essentially, grit is like the act of persistence and determination, of just seeking out better for yourself, putting your feet on the ground, keep walking, keep trying, keep fighting, keep learning. Like it's just that act of like that total resilience to the negative things that happen, and that defiance to like, I'm not going to let other people tell me how to do things or bring me down. And I really like that, because you can be a lot of negative things sometimes as well, but I feel like even everybody can look at someone who doesn't give up and still like that about them, and it's so apparent. So even if you're not making a lot of good choices in your life at that current moment, the fact that you're like not giving up on trying to do what's best,
right?
I mean, that's really important. And so a lot of my mantras also circle around different words that are encompassed in those like dictionary explanations. So I will like say to myself, like, you are brave, I'm resilient, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I am intuitive. I really like, and I think I put it in my like a sentence about the author on Thought Catalog, is that I am a unique and intuitive individual. And those are two of my favorite things about me, is that I really, really like my ability to connect with total strangers and get them to open up and have deep conversations with someone that I don't even really know the things that most other people know about them. Like, I'm really terrible with names, which I feel like sometimes clashes with like the things that I talk about and the things I want to bring forward into my relationships, that people think that's such an offensive thing to forget someone's name multiple times after meeting them. But for me, it's like, I could tell you what their favorite sports team is. Like, I could tell you what we talked about last time I saw you. I could jump right back into that conversation. And I feel like that's way more important. And sometimes I get stuck on the fact that people don't look like their names. We get named as babies. I feel
You're
like
not Eddie.
I feel like I look like my name, but there are some people I meet that I just feel like their name doesn't totally suit them, that it's not unique enough, or it's not vibrant enough, or it's, not old-fashioned enough. Like, I think sometimes people get born at the wrong time, people get misnamed. So I like to focus on the things that are like very much like the wholesome, like they that part of them that is them.
Right.
That conversation we have where you can't be ingenuine. I don't know if that's a way to
Disingenuine.
I don't know. Ungenuine, disingenuine. I don't know.
I'm going to ruin it.
But you can't be that when you start having certain like deeper level conversations. Yeah, so that's why I put like being intuitive and being empathetic and being unique are like the things that, like, I would get mad. And I thought about this the other day. I like the Enneagram, which I don't have to go into that, but Enneagram says 4s are the individualist. And so I really pride myself on being unique and who I am and one of a kind. And that's super important to me. And it also like factors into like my genetic pool. Like, a lot of people really don't look like me on a genetic level. And so if someone were to come to me and be like, you're just like everyone else, it would floor me.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
I don't want to be like everyone else. But knowing yourself, you also know that's just not true. Everyone is themselves. Each of us has an important job to do in some way. And you got to keep trudging on. You got to figure out what that is and do that thing.
In like learning these things about yourself and like allowing yourself to have them, like, you know what, I do like this. I like being an individual. Like, that's fine. Let myself have it. Like, just, and then learn what that's all about and like learn how you can benefit that thing. I always talk about meditation. The thing about meditation is when you're meditating and you notice, the moment that you notice that you've been lost in thought, when you're like, oh shoot, I wasn't paying attention to my breath. That moment, that's a bicep curl. That's a curl. You just, boom. That's, you know, oh, okay, I noticed. And you're back to your breath. And then, 15 seconds later, you're like, oh crap, I was thinking about my laundry again. And then, but that, when you're like, let's go back to the breath, that's another bicep curl. And I think that resilience and finding out finding out about yourself and learning about yourself. I was trying to relate it back to every time that you notice or every time you learn about yourself, it's a bicep curl.
You're strengthening your belief in who you are.
Right.
And what you're capable of.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're building that. And every time you do it, it gets a little bit stronger. So like more and more situations when you're like, I don't know what I'm all about, or you're triggered or you're set off by these different things. Like when you know who you are, you don't just all of a sudden wake up one day and you're like, I know exactly who I am. And I'm 100% that person now. And any interaction I come in contact with, they're going to hit me in the chest and I'm going to be fine because I know who I am. That's not how it is. You got to like almost figure out who you are. That's what life is. And I think that when you get on those things and you're like, that's who I am. Like I am, like grit, for example, you're talking about grit. Like every time that when shit gets hard and you kick in that voice of I can do this because I have grit. That's a bicep curl, that's like every time you do it, you get a little bit stronger and you're building yourself into this thing, but you already knew you were this thing. You're just really stepping into it. I think, just doing those bicep curls and like just doing the work of accepting yourself and building where you need to build. We're getting a little up here in time. I want to make sure that you mentioned Thought Catalog. Can you let listeners know where they can find you at?
So aside from like actually getting a link, which I don't know if we can attach to like the podcast itself when you post it.
I could probably put it on the Spotify or on the info.
I would just like Google search like Mika Woodruff Thought Catalog and it'll bring you to like my author section, which there's only 3 of them on there right now. Still trying to decide on that 4th and when I'm going to attack it and resubmit it. Yeah. But otherwise, just downloading Thought Catalog or Google searching it because there's tons of other great articles on there about various different things. They upload new ones every day and they're by, I would imagine, some professional writers who do it for fun and a lot of non-professional writers. I mean, sometimes I see certain names pop up, dozen or so more like times. Like I know that they have books that they publish with them too, but just lots of fresh viewpoints and faces and lots of silver linings and ways to take the positives out of negative scenarios. And I really appreciate it because it's fresh, it's transparent, but it's also like, but we're not taking shit lying down. Like,
right.
There's got to be a other side to this coin.
Do you scroll through like that sort of thing instead of like Facebook or Instagram sometimes? Like that's something that I tried when I stopped using social media. I was like, I replaced it with Reddit, of course, at first. And then you kind of you start finding like individual blogs that you like, and you're kind of absorbing that good information rather than just kind of like the endless entertainment. Sometimes it's good. Yeah,
and I've found Thought Catalog to be a lot more wholesome than some other places. Some other places are more like a magazine or like they're really into marketing things, and so they'll do like BuzzFeed does like other things, and Medium does other things, and there's another one I can't think of, but they're kind of like more like the marketing side. And Thought Catalog, as far as I know, doesn't pay anyone to like submit, and they don't take any money from anyone to have their things submitted. So it's just very come as you are. Someone you don't know edits it, emails you whether or not it got accepted, and then it's shared openly. And I think that's what's pretty cool about it.
Cool. Well, people definitely have to check you out on there, and I'm, in time, and I'm not trying to push you, but I look forward to you continuing your writing journey. I look forward to more conversations too, if you'd be willing. I think this was a great conversation. Thanks for dealing with my like not format today. You know, you got here and I'm like, hey, I've been kind of sad. Do you want to just talk? You know, so I do appreciate that, Mika. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been fun. It took some time getting used to like the headphones and the microphone, but I think I've got it now. Like once I got past like the whole like aesthetics of the fact that we're in a recording place.
Yeah, I know. I'm always telling people like, yeah, just grab that fucking thing. It's fine. You're good. But I get it. I get the same. You know, when people are trying to like help me load my gear, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to bump anything with this. It's just people are so sweet to me, and so like in a room, a lot of times you're like, I know that like I might break something because I don't know what things do. I don't want to touch it, but. Thanks for getting comfortable and sinking into it.
Yeah,
you know?
This was really fun. Thank you for the experience and showing an interest and having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, listener, take care of yourself and work on your grit. Sharpen your grit. Sharpen your emotional toolkit. Do your bicep curls and drink some fucking water.